Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about What If Deku Was a Dragon Part 2. If you guys enjoy this What If and want to see Part 3, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story 𝗧𝗵𝗲 from Wattpad. So let's start the video. In the USJ Central Plaza, in a day full of surprises, some good, most bad, with 𝐒𝐻𝐁𝐲, the fusion of Izuku and Ochako here for the third time in existence, was dealing with the Nomu that she sent towards the ground as she landed on the ground at a far distance from the monster with her eyes narrowed while clenching her fist. With the Nomu getting up from the ground with no injuries on its person as it yelled out a roar and ran towards 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲, who clicked her tongue. "In this thing just don't know when to give up," 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲 cursed under her breath, leaning back as the Nomu swiped at her with its claws. She then started flying backwards, her heels skimming the ground. Nomu's claws missed her by inches, nearly catching the fusion on the nose. Nomu didn't stop, rushing after the teen, swiping wildly. In turn, 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲 brought up both gauntlets, blocking the many hits while being pushed back, but then as the Nomu hit the gauntlets, they sent a blast towards the Nomu, pushing back, with 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲 having a look surprise on her face. "Okay, gravity, push and pull, and the gauntlets help with the pushing if I go over my limits. Okay, I roll this." With that, 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲 fired 4 consecutive gravity blasts at the Nomu's face, with its instinct telling it to put its arms up to avoid any more blast that hits its face. Only feel its body suddenly being pulled by gravity, with 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲 running towards the Nomu and clenching her right hand, rearing it back while changing the gravity to make it feel heavy, and then gravitational pulse. 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲 hit Nomu right across the jaw, gauntlet firing at the moment of impact. The beast's head jerked to the side, nearly spinning round while being pushed back, with 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲 grinning, only have her eyes widen as Nomu reared back around, but was stopped when it felt itself floating in the air courtesy of 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲 using her quirk on the monster at the last second, and sent 3 more gravity blasts against Nomu's midsection. Nomu squawked in surprise as it got pushed back even more in the air, as its skin suddenly being pushed in until it felt a hole through its midsection, but it healed that injury. But it couldn't even run after 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲 because of it being airborne, but that led to giving 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲 the advantage, which made her smirk as she used her quirk to make her body feel light as ever. With speed that looks powerful than All Might's, she blitzed above the monster, who went for a punch but missed, and in one motion, 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲 was behind the beast, still airborne, as her eyes glowed with her fist clenched, and slammed the beast upwards, pushing it far above and hitting the ceiling with a large thud. But as the Nomu was about to get up, it felt gravity pulling it towards 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲, who slammed the beast again to the ceiling and putting pressure on the Nomu and putting it in place while sending multiple punches at the Nomu while gritting her teeth. 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲 knew that her being here wasn't helping both of her counterparts in the slightest. Even though it took her some time to be born into existence, that doesn't mean she can hold on for much longer. She knows that her counterpart, which was Izuku, was injured not just physically but mentally as well from when he battled the Nomu, and how he could keep going, but this was her limit. In fact, this might be the actually drawback for Izuku's quirk because of his injuries. 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲 felt her hands hurt, but she didn't care. Curse her counterpart, who doesn't care about his well-being. She sighed as she con on her assault against the Nomu, with her eyes that were glowing were getting dimmer and dimmer. "All I can do now is buy some time until the actual pros get here," she said, but then she felt the movement of the Nomu, which made her pushed even more pressure on the beast, but then it turned its head and smirked. Maybe it was her mind playing tricks on her, but the fact that the beast was looking at her made her creeped out. But then the Nomu moved its arms and punched 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲, pushing her back and free falling towards the ground, with the Nomu following after her. "What the hell?" she screamed out, and then saw the Nomu laughing. 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 Killine gonna kill ya. Her eyes widen as she saw the Nomu blitz towards her with a burst of speed in the air and slammed her with its fist, sending her towards the ground with a crash. 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲, however, was okay since she blocked the attack at the last minute, but the punch did hurt, along with her eyes flickering and her breathing hitched. "Damnit!" The Nomu landed on the ground and didn't waste time to run after her and sending a punch her way, but 𝗂𝐻𝐁𝐲 was quicker. By changing her gravity, she avoided the punch at quick speeds and jumping in the air for a second until she increased her gravity to weigh more than 1 ton, and rearing her arm and sending a punch to the Nomu's head where the brain was, and the Nomu hit the ground hard. 𝐬𝐳 had to take a breather while seeing the Nomu laying there for a few seconds, which made her go for another punch, but the Nomu reacted and grabbed her arm with an even wider grin that caused her to reel back in disgust, and feeling her being lifted up in the air made her have a slow reaction as she was slammed to the ground over and over. With her screaming in pain at the final slam down, she increased her body's gravity, causing her to be heavy, which pulled the Nomu back, and using her other arm to send a gravity blast at its head once more, causing it to stagger and giving her arm a bit of freedom as she took a step back. What the hell happened? Why did it take all of a sudden? She thought as the Nomu looked at her direction and was about to attack. And the next thing that happened was ice that traveled towards the Nomu and putting it in an ice-like cage that made it unable to move. 𝗬𝐻 turned her head to see the person who did it, and saw that it was her classmate Miyuki Todoroki, who let out a breath of cold air. That won't hold this thing for much longer, 𝗬𝐻, right? Miyuki asked towards the fusion, who simply nodded her head as she got up from the ground while holding her arm a bit. Yeah, that's me, but let's save the introductions later and make sure that monster doesn't move soon. But as she said that, the Nomu roared while forcing its body to tear away, leaving traces of BLD in its wake and falling to the ground like it was lost. This made the two to feel like their lunches was about to leave their stomachs, with 𝗬𝐻 sending a slight gravity pressure on the beast to buy them some time. It didn't take long for the two to hear the sounds of explosion coming their way, and in time for 𝗬𝐻 to see a blast that was close to hitting her if she didn't decrease her gravity and jump high enough to avoid it, with the blast hitting the Nomu and pushing it away. What the hell? 𝗬𝐻 yelled out as she saw that the one who fired it was 𝗵𝘃𝗀, who prepared to do another explosion but stopped when Miyuki got in his way. Out of the way, icy hot. This punk thinks they can fight that freak without me in the mix. F that. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 said while trying to forward, but he was stopped by an ice attack from Miyuki. And can't you see that you were about to hurt our classmates with your reckless firing? When she said that, 𝗵𝘃𝗀 got a good look at the fusion until it clicked like a pin on a hand grenade, with his surprised look turned to anger. Are you kidding me? Are you telling me that nerd's quirk helps him first? Not only that, he fused with a weakling no less. That set the terms in 𝗬𝐻's mind to snap. With a motion from her hand, 𝗵𝘃𝗀 suddenly felt his body hit the ground with a heavy thud while he struggled to get back up. How's that for a weakling, dumbass? But all she got was a scream of anger from 𝗵𝘃𝗀. Is the fight over already? The one who said this was 𝗔𝗂𝘁𝗵𝗲, who must got here while seeing the down 𝗵𝘃𝗀 on the floor, making him look towards the fusion, who stared at the redhead. Wow, it's good to see ya again, 𝗬𝐻. He said this towards the fusion, who only laughed. Nice to see ya too, 𝗓𝗁𝗵𝗲, right now. The sound of the Nomu was heard, who finally regenerated its whole body, no thanks to 𝗵𝘃𝗀, who gave it time. It seems this thing still wants to clash even more, 𝗬𝐻 said while looking at 𝗵𝘃𝗀 with a sigh, until with a slight hand movement released him until got up with a glare on his face. I'll deal with you after I show this monster what the future #1 hero is all about. He said this while getting ready to face the Nomu, but he wasn't alone. Hey now, don't leave me out of the fun. I want to see how much damage I can deal with this thing, 𝗓𝗁𝗵𝗲 said while getting his quirk activated. I guess I can help you guys out until the pros gets here, Miyuki said with her ice coating her right side. With 𝗬𝐻, she simply smirked while her eyes glowed, but it was dimmer than ever, but she had to push it. She had to be here and fight because she was created from the love of her counterparts, which made her eyes glow with intensity as she stood beside the other three while her arms were out. Might as well join the party. You better not slow me down, fellas. As soon as she said that, she ran, making 𝗵𝘃𝗀 scream at her, with 𝗓𝗁𝗵𝗲 and Todoroki following them, all four with serious looks on their faces and facing against the Nomu that roared even more. No matter how I look at it, this 𝗧𝗫 isn't dead. That's what Katsuki thought of while blasting the Nomu with his explosions and the sending a punch its way, which did nothing. The Nomu went for a punch towards Katsuki, who was fast enough to avoid it and sending another blast, but the Nomu just brushed it off as his attacks did nothing to it, which pissed 𝗵𝘃𝗀 off. Suddenly the Nomu was frozen in place and 𝗓𝗁𝗵𝗲 was seen running towards with speed and using his quirk to spam the Nomu on its head, which caused it to scream and hitting the ground hard. I didn't need your help, weird hair. Katsuki yelled out towards 𝗓𝗁𝗵𝗲, who only laughed. Yeah, well, it looked like you were close to getting hit. He was gonna get hit if I didn't stop the Nomu's fist in time, Katsuki growled at Miyuki, who was busy observing the Nomu while 𝗬𝐻 walked towards 𝗓𝗁𝗵𝗲. "So how did it feel running at that speed?" she asked the redhead, who just laughed, saying it was fun, which got her to smile, but that disappeared when the Nomu was getting up, but it got hit by a block of ice that pushed it back far enough for the four to get a breather. "This thing is really taking all of our attacks like it's nothing," Miyuki said while lowering down her right hand while walking beside Okazu, who nodded her head while using a quick hand movement towards the Nomu to increase its gravity to put it down while feeling the struggle, as the glow in her eyes got dimmer by the second. "You're right, and no matter what we do it keeps on getting up or healing itself. We don't even know its DMN limit." Then they heard the sound of the ice breaking caused the four to see the Nomu out of its ice prison, with Katsuki blasted forwards and slamming a concentrated fist towards its midsection that only pushed it back a little. He was about to send another punch, but the Nomu started to float up, thrashing that it can't feel the ground, only to get pushed up even further by none other than Izu, who started to sweat and her glowing, which made Kirishima and Todoroki to widen their eyes, but Okazu simply yelled at them, "I can't hold on any longer than this, so finish this son of a beach." She screamed, with Katsuki simply smirked and shouted out, "What do you think I've been doing? I'll show that freak the power of the future #1 hero." Saying this as he blasted towards the Nomu, who saw the boy coming near it, but it couldn't do anything as it was hit by multiple blasts of explosive hits from Bakugo, who viciously punched the Nomu with a powerful punch to its face that pushed it towards the ground, causing the Goron to form a large spider-like crack to the floor. Bakugo then landed near the three while laughing, "And that's how it's done," he said, with Miyuki staring at him a blank look, Kirishima looking at him while sweat dropping, while Okazu was busy groaning a bit as if her stomach was doing a flip in her body. But something happened that got them to look at the place where the Nomu was, and they heard laughter, and then a large figure was in front of Bakugo, who couldn't react fast and got punched in the face, which made him get pushed back, but Kirishima caught him in time, but he also got pushed back, as the only two people who were there facing the Nomu were Miyuki and Okazu. The Nomu then got closer to them, which resulted in an attack of ice courtesy of Miyuki. The Nomu then forced itself out of the ice only to get another blast of gravity, pushing it back even more, with Okazu screaming in particular as her body glowed even more, which got Miyuki to focus on the fusion. "Are you alright? What's going on?" she asked with a hint of worry in her voice. But Okazu couldn't say anything as her body glowed, and the one color that represented her was split and formed two colors that were emerald green and light pink, as these two colors formed two figures. And once the glow around them disappeared, it was revealed to be Izuku and Ochako, with Ochako bring the one to open her eyes and widen in surprise as she saw the state that Izuku was in. "Izuku!" she screamed as she got closer to him, as he was breathing heavily, as the injuries he had before looked like they were opening back. The sound of the Nomu got even louder, which made the two girls to widen their eyes as the Nomu was seen running towards them, with Miyuki narrowing her eyes, since it seems that she's the only one who wasn't out of commission yet with that. She sent an ice to the floor on the Nomu's path, causing it to slip on the ice, making the monster to be dragged and headed towards them, with Miyuki creating an ice platform to move her along with Izuku and Ochako to avoid the incoming Nomu that almost grabbed them. But that wasn't the case. "Uraraka, it seems you need to get yourself and Midoriya out of here. I'll take care of the Nomu," Miyuki said as she focused on the Nomu that was getting up. Ochako knew that she should, but the way Izuku holding onto her and trying to move his body made her realize that Izuku still wanted to help, which made her follow her brain instead of her heart. "Izuku, you need to go," she said to him quietly as she used her quirk on his body, cussing him to float up, and she grabbed Izuku and tried to leave, but then a large black skin hand was seen grabbing Ochako by surprise as she screamed in pain as she was slammed to ground. But before the Nomu could punch her, it was attacked and pushed away from an ice attack, but it didn't look powerful enough to give them a distance away from the Nomu. But the Nomu was then being delivered by an explosive punch and a heavy impact from two figures, which were Kirishima and Bakugo, who were back in action, with the latter clenching his fist in anger. "I'm gonna make sure your sorry ugly but face gets even more damaged," he yelled out. "Whoa, not very hero. Like my man," Kirishima said. The Nomu just creamed out as it got ready to run towards them while being on all fours. But right now we see Izuku on the ground as he stared at the sight of Ochako, the way she was 𝗓𝗵𝗲 it, while Miyuki was helping to ease to pain while using her ice on the girl. But Izuku saw nothing but darkness, a cold, silent darkness covered Izuku's. He looked in front of him, a large metal door that was 𝗓𝗵𝗲 it for him, calling him to open the doors so that he can enter, and as he got closer he saw memories that weren't his own, and all he could saw was embers, both Kirishima and Bakugo were delaying the Nomu's attack as much as they can, but the more they tried the more the Nomu was trying with them, and it got worse, as if the creature was reading their moves and avoiding their attacks, and sent an attack to the two boys' midsection that caused them to spit out their saliva and being pushed back far enough, but the Nomu wasn't done, as it sent a kick towards them which Bakugo avoided the attack. Meanwhile Kirishima blocked while activating his quirk towards his arms and being pushed. The Nomu was then hit by an ice attack, but it wasn't phased from the sudden attack, as it laughed like it found something funny. Miyuki gasped. She saw the Nomu slammed Kirishima fast enough for the boy to get pushed back even harder the end before, and went after Bakugo, who sent a powerful punch, but the punch didn't even put a dent on the monster, as this made Bakugo widen his eyes in fear as his arm got broken even more from the Nomu, snapping it like a twig, making him scream, and then being slammed down hard to the ground while spitting out BLD as he laid on the ground. The Nomu slowly turned to face her, and Todoroki felt bile start to rise up her throat. There was more muscle than skin covering the Nomu's body, bone being visible in places. Its right arm was missing, its left barely connected by bone and thin strands of muscle. And its head, its entire bottom jaw and part of its throat were just gone. Part of its skull caved in where its right eye should have been. By all accounts, the thing looked like a moving corpse. But Todoroki's horror only mounted as she watched the red muscle moving, bulging and oozing back over where it was missing, new blackened skin forming by the second. Todoroki gawked at the monster before him for 1 second too long. Nomu lunged forward, its remaining arm outstretched. Todoroki flinched back, throwing her right arm up. Once again, Nomu was encased head to toe in an icy prison, stopped dead in its tracks. Without waiting, Todoroki sent out another wave of ice, encasing the ice block within another one. She repeated this several times, layering ice upon ice until Nomu's body was nothing more than a blurry outline within. Todoroki sucked in a few deep breaths, trying to slow her pounding heart. She steadied herself, looking over Nomu's new prison. She allowed herself a small sigh coming towards Kirishima's aid as her grabbed him and placed him where Izuku and Ochako are, with the latter breathing normally and not in pain. She sighed, but she looked more towards Izuku, who was twitching as if he was having seizure, which made her worry for the boy, while Kirishima was more or less okay, but still he was in pain but trying to toughing it out. And then there was Bakugo, who was far from the area. She knows she had to go and help him in case more villains were still around the area, but her mind was telling her that if she does do that, she might regret it, so right now she needs to find a way to get her classmates out of here, cause if she didn't, they might not survive. From here, a spike of ice completely unrelated to her quirk shot down Todoroki's spine, the sudden sound stopping her dead in her tracks. Eyes bulging in disbelief, she rounded on where Nomu stood trapped. A crack was slowly climbing its way across the ice block, right over where Nomu's outstretched arm was. Minute. Todoroki sent out more ice, adding another layer atop what he'd already done. Within seconds, the crack worked its way to the new surface, spreading once again. Todoroki responded by pouring on more ice. This shouldn't be happening, Todoroki thought to herself, gritting her teeth as she felt her right arm slowly going numb. She knew how strong her ice was. Nothing can get through it. The only thing that might have a chance is All Might himself. Or something strong enough to kill this monster. Todoroki didn't bother acknowledging that thought. She just poured on more ice. As much as she could make, as fast as she could make it, so that not only she can survive but those in her class as well. While she was doing this, she didn't know that the fable Izuku Midoriya had his eyes opened and they had nothing but a look of anger. Embers. Todoroki had never created this much ice before. Even in all the practice she had done, she'd only ever focused on how to use her ice. How fast she could make it, how she could shape it, how quickly she could change what direction she was sending it. All skills pounded into her head as the most important thing. She'd never just cut loose, pushing herself to create a single piece of ice with no limit to its size. In any other circumstances, she'd have been impressed with herself. And a small part of her was. However, that part was completely drowned out by the rest of her screaming in raging disbelief that the ice was still cracking, despite being nearly 20 feet thick. Todoroki sucked in a harsh breath, her breath coming out in a cloud of steam. She'd completely lost feeling in her right arm, her right leg not too far behind as the cold spread across her chest. Her whole body was shivering, her knees beginning to shake from the strain. She ignored the warmth she could feel flickering in her chest, aching to rush through her left side and remove the cold. She wouldn't give in. She didn't need that warmth. She didn't need. A sharp yell tore itself from her lips as her right leg finally gave out. She tried to catch herself as she fell, but the moment her right arm hit the ground, pain erupted in the limb, paradoxically freezing and burning at the same time. The ice on her right side fell away, revealing too pale flesh that was starting to turn purple in places. Todoroki curled up around her injured arm, gritting her teeth against the pain. She squinted up at the iceberg she'd created, Nomu nothing more than a faint outline buried in the center of it. It was almost 30 feet across, nearly 40 feet high of layer after layer of ice encased over itself. At how dense she'd made it, it would be like being encased inside a mass of solid steel. And it was still cracking. No, Todoroki tried to push herself up, refusing to believe what she was seeing. Nothing could be that strong. Yet, as the seconds ticked by, the cracks grew wider and wider. And with her arm and leg in the shape they were, all Todoroki could do was lie there and wait for the inevitable. There was a loud crack like a gunshot. Then another. And another. Soon the whole structure was covered in jagged lines of broken ice, shaking and shuddering as the being inside strained against its bonds. When Nomu got free, it didn't just escape the ice block, it shattered it. Chunks of ice several feet across were sent flying into the air, crashing into the surrounding landscape with enough force to dig trails through the rock and dirt. Todoroki shielded her eyes against the explosion of air that followed the ice block's destruction, her ears ringing as a bone-chilling roar filled the air. There Nomu stood in the middle of an icy crater, completely healed and looking none the worse for wear. Its flesh had healed, its eye regrown, and both blank, beady orbs were staring right at Todoroki. The beast sucked in a deep breath, a roar building in the back of its throat as it prepared to charge forward. Todoroki swallowed hard, mind racing as she tried to think of what she could do. Her thoughts came to an end as Miyuki saw the side of the Nomu's head caved in and was blasted away from a figure that held power as the force pushed the Nomu away. Todoroki's eyes widened, trying to process what she was seeing as Nomu bent to the side, its head injured. It looked up at the sky, screeching in rage. A shadow fell over it and Todoroki, making the teen look up as well. Her mouth fell open in shock. Izuku was the one that dealt with the sudden attack, moving as if he wasn't injured as he hovered in the air above them, as he looked towards the Nomu, his eyes staring at the monster with no hint of mercy. As Izuku landed close to the Nomu, it reacted as it went to punch Izuku for the boy to avoid it in time and clenched his fist. Impact, as soon as he said that, his fist connected the midsection of the Nomu and the beast itself felt an excruciating pain and was pushed back and hitting the ground hard. But the Nomu went after him, which resulted in the same way as if it was pushed 𝗵𝘃𝐻, only this time it was got a fist connected to its face, pushing it back and flying through the air, and then got kicked by Izuku, who used his speed to get near the beast and send a devastating kick to its side, causing the monster to hit a wall. His arms stretched high over his head. Izuku spared Todoroki a quick glance and then towards Ochako and Kirishima, with the latter getting up but barely. "Go to a safe place." That's all Izuku said to the trio, with Miyuki wanting to retort, but when Izuku gave her a glare she went silent as Izuku blitzed towards the Nomu. There was the sound of impact from the large dust cloud that was formed, a roar from Nomu, which cut off suddenly. Another impact, and Nomu and Izuku tumbled out, with Izuku tackling the monster to the ground with speed that caught it off by surprise as he rained down a blast of heat and wind unconsciously in his fist towards the Nomu, blow after blow, which caused the Nomu's flesh and muscles to be exposed. "Come on!" Izuku screamed in rage between his punches. "How much you got left? You gotta be close, you Sonova dash." Nomu cut him off with a lunge, the writhing stump that had been its left arm knocking the boy away, with Izuku rolling as he landed, jumping back to the beast as Nomu met him halfway. Izuku landed several blows to Nomu's midsection, every one of them powered by a blow that contained the heat that he was using, as his eyes glowed with fire like will in his very soul, along with him using the wind that was explosively erupting from his knuckles. before having to leap over an attempted bear hug. With a yell, Izuku landed a full-powered punch right to Nomu's exposed brain, actually making the beast stumble. Seeing the opening, Izuku brought both of his hands together and yelling out with rage. "GOF, burn yourself." A high condensation of fire that formed in Izuku's hand hit the Nomu point blank, causing it to screech as it was overwhelmed by Izuku's attack and being unable to defend itself. Izuku smiled viciously as he felt the heat getting hotter as he poured even more power. Hearing the sound of the Nomu screeching in pain made him feel satisfied at what he was doing. But suddenly the Nomu leapt at him covered in smoke and burnt flesh, but Izuku moved out of the way. But instead of a wild lunge, like the boy had thought, Nomu had both arms pulled high over its head, its hand clasped together. Izuku sent a ball of fire, but that didn't stop the Nomu as it brought its arms down in an overhead blow. Izuku was a blur as he was spiked into the ground, the stone cracking from the blow. Izuku got up as if that didn't hurt him, his smile still visible on his face as he looked towards the Nomu as it landed above him and it went hit him again, but Izuku grabbed the Nomu's arm and body slammed it to the ground. But that didn't stop the Nomu, but Izuku wasn't done yet as he grabbed the Nomu's head and slammed it to the ground hard with his hands superheated that it made the Nomu squirm in pain as it went to grab Izuku. The boy himself suddenly caught the Nomu's arm, but he didn't use his arm to catch it, used his moith to the stop arm in time and bit into it while putting more firepower in hand that was on the Nomu's exposed brain. It made the Nomu scream even more, but Izuku didn't care as he continued the action he was doing and biting through the Nomu's flesh while pulling the arm from out the monster's arm socket. The Nomu screamed even more and used its lower body to GRT up, which forced Izuku to pull the arm out even more as BLD was spilled, which made the Nomu scream witu Izuku a distance away, holding the arm in his mouth and then spit it out as if it didn't have any taste. The Nomu glared at Izuku while regrowing its 𝗬𝗏, but Izuku didn't let that happen as Izuku blitzed above the monster and slammed his finest at the Nomu's exposed brain, hitting it hard that its head hit the ground hard enough for a spider-like crack to form. Izuku then grabbed the Nomu by its head as the Nomu tried to grab Izuku's head with success as it tried to strangle Izuku, but Izuku simply ripped its arm away as it screamed even more, and then with its beak-like mouth wide open, Izuku slammed his whole arm inside the monster's mouth and gave it a cruel smirk on his face. "Say your prayers to 𝗂𝐿. And then it felt its same excruciating heat that it tried to move but it couldn't because of the blow it got from Izuku to the head, that its motor motions weren't available to it, and it felt fear as it stared into the eyes of Izuku Midoriya. The color of his eyes were burning red with his cruel smile that plastered on his facet. Suddenly felt tears pouring out of its eyes as if it was begging for Izuku, but the boy himself just laughed. "Sorry, all out of mercy for your kind, sayonara." And then the burning sensation caused its inside to burn even more as it couldn't even scream in pain, as its flesh started to burn even more as its body was turning to a crisp as Izuku watched this unfold with no care on his face, or rather, his mind wasn't seeing this at all. Because inside his mind he was seen floating in a dark cold area and he was being watched by something in the darkness with its eyes staring at him with interest. From the top of USJ entrance, the reunited members of Class 1A were in awe as they witnessed Nomu's demise from one of their own. The monster being nothing but a black crumpled dust as there was steam where the beast stood, while Izuku was seen standing and looked to be unmoving, but his were glowing as well as flickering in a ruby red color. Not noticing Miyuki, Kirishima and Ochako, with the latter, who was finally awake, stared at the back of the both who she cherished. Izuku then turned his attention towards the trio, who looked at him. "It's over," he said in confirmation, which made Kirishima sigh on content, Miyuki taking a knee while clenching her arm on Ochako, who got up painfully and walked towards Izuku, who stared at the girl. As she got closer, she held the side of his face, feeling the heat, but it didn't harm her. Instead, she only felt warmth from Izuku, who grabbed her and brought into a hug as his transformation disappeared. "Ochako," he said as she held him as his consciousness slipped away, making him go to sleep with her, gently combing his hair with her fingers. Very faintly, they thought they could hear excited shouts from up on the entrance ramp, the gathered students no doubt having reached the same conclusion. Both Kirishima and Miyuki got towards the duo, with the latter staring at the boy who took down the Nomu. Is it down?" This made Miyuki, Kirishima and Ochako to snap their heads as Miyuki followed on as the unfamiliar voice registered, with Izuku opening one eye as he was back in the living slumped with his expression caught between irritation and dismay. There, peering out from behind the debris of broken grounds that were cracked, was one of the many villains Shigaraki had brought with him. His eyes were not on the students, but the crumpled form of Nomu that was a few distance away from the 4 students. As if acting on some unheard signal, more villains suddenly began to appear, either waking up from where they'd been previously knocked out or retreating from whatever hiding places they had found. They all stared at their fallen weapon with a mixture of relief and terror. The brats took it out. I thought that thing was supposed to fight All Might. What do we do now? Where's Shigaraki? I think he bailed. What? Well, do you see him anywhere? But he was our exit. How do we get out of here? Hell, I don't know. As the villains began to squabble amongst themselves, just starting to register their situation, Okako slowly hauled Izuku to his feet, gratefully assisted by her quirk. She slowly started to edge them backward, away from the villains that were steadily growing more irritable. Izuku's eyes never left the gathering group, his left arm twitching as he tried to call out that power, but to no avail, as all thoughts of resting gone as more villains appeared out of the woodwork. Todoroki found herself moving towards the 2 at a similar pace, her longing to prove herself warring with the blinding pain of her frostbitten arm. Her right arm held tightly against her chest, she slowly backed up with Kirishima moving in as well, quirk at the ready. Ochako saw this and kept moving, gravitating to meet the 2 halfway. Unfortunately, Izuku suddenly felt a pain that was caused by using that power before they could get too far, a yelp torn from his lips as he bent at the waist. In an instant, the eyes of every villain were on them. Ochako tensed, at a loss for what to do. Todoroki rose her right arm, frost curling from her fingertips as she grit her teeth, the mere motion lighting her chest up in pain. Kirishima glaring at them as he faced the villains and placing himself in front of the trio as he tried to be a shield for them. For a few seconds, the 2 sides could only stare at each other, for students facing nearly a dozen villains. Finally, one of the villains, a woman with tiger fangs curling over her bottom lip, spoke up. Well, if we're stuck here, the heroes are coming for us. Think a couple of hostages would help us out. Todoroki cursed under her breath. Another villain, one who seemed to have oil dripping from his mouth and nose, gave, appropriately, an oily smile. We're screwed anyways. Couldn't hurt. Perfect. Just perfect. Izuku groaned out, his whole body felt like it was tearing itself apart. The villains started to fan out, now sporting excited grins. With their leadership now gone, mob mentality won out for their next course of action. Careful guys, one said, his head shaped like crocodiles. This lot did take down Nomu. Yeah, but they ain't looking so hot now, replied another, his ears large and bat-like. Nuff talking, a snake-haired woman cut off their bantering. Let's make this fast. Now fully surrounded, Todoroki felt her back press up against Ochako's, letting her feel how she spoke, both from her own fear and the vibrations that came from Izuku, who, despite having his body shuddering in pain, he was still active and ready to fight. Todoroki's eyes zeroed in on the 2 villains closest, ice running up her arm and down her leg in preparation, with Kirishima preparing to face the villains. Get ready guys, he said, and without any warning, one of the villains rushed forward, the others quickly following his lead. In the same motion, Todoroki tensed her arm. Izuku glared as he stood his ground, and L using one of the elements throwing up his mangled right arm in the same instant as wind dancing across his palm, crash. All movement ceased, all attacks cancelled, as the entirety of USJ suddenly shook. A whistling sound echoed through the building as 2 flat, dented hunks of metal soared through the air across the plaza. It took them a moment for them to realize that what they were seeing were the massive doors of the USJ entrance, smashed clear off their hinges. As the doors crashed to the ground on the opposite side of the building, students and villains alike followed their flight path. A plume of smoke was coming from the entranceway, light streaming through where the doors once were. In the opening stood a familiar figure, stepping his way through the smoke to the 1A students. It's all right now. With a sob of relief, Ochako's legs gave out, dragging Izuku back down to his knees with her. Not that he could blame her in the slightest. Todoroki could only look back at the entranceway in disbelief, her arm going limp while Kirishima grinned at the individual's appearance. Why? Walking past the relived faces of his students, quickly looking them all over as well as 13 and Aizawa's prone forms, All Might stepped up to the edge of the entrance ramp, a fearsome scowl on his face as he looked down at the villains now cowering below. Because I am here. The number one hero took in a deep breath, likely to give his typical speech to both encourage the students and demoralize the villains, but he paused as he truly registered the shape the USJ was in. His eyes fell immediately towards what was clear the monster that looked to be nothing but a grotesque object, quickly moving from the wreck of the mock-up ship to the surrounding areas. The destroyed plaza fountain, the rubble that once was the mountain zone, before finally following the deep rivet of scorched earth leading away from the lake. When his eyes finally fell on Izuku, Ochako, Kirishima and Todoroki, they widened just enough to make out the blue hidden within his sunken sockets. The villains around the four immediately backed off, several of them dropping their various weapons as their knees began to shake. Without Nomu or Shigaraki, as well as the unnatural sight of an angry All Might, whatever delusional courage they had worked up fled in an instant. In the next second, All Might blurred out of view, a rush of wind trailing behind him as he charged into the plaza. In a flash, he darted around to every villain he could see, knocking them out with a single punch before they even hit the ground. He paused for a mere moment to look at them, before turning his attention back up towards the mountain zone. Sweat dripping down his face, the oil-mouthed villain waved his hands back and forth in a panic. Hold up. We dash. He didn't get to finish his plea, for All Might was already upon him, driving the villain's head into the ground. The rest met a similar fate, either being dropped in a single hit or thrown off into the distance. In less than 30 seconds, the teacher and students were the only ones left conscious in the immediate area. Todoroki stared at the downed villains surrounding them in stunned awe. He did all that in seconds. He didn't even try. The pro let out a deep breath, tearing his eyes away from his students to give USJ another glance over. Off in the distance, he could see more villains watching them, as if trying to gauge their chances against the number one hero. And from his quick head count, there were several members of Class 1A unaccounted for. The sound of an approaching engine drew his attention. He looked back towards the entrance, finding Ida rushing down the stairs towards them with Kaminari right behind him, the remaining students watching the boys go with worried expressions. All Might considered them for a moment, before nodding to himself, smiling once again. He turned his attention to Todoroki, making the two-tone-haired girl stiffen. Young Todoroki, is your arm injured? Todoroki stared dumbly for a moment, then winced. Somehow, she'd forgotten the arm held tight against her chest until that moment. Why, sir, she said plainly. But I can handle it for the moment. All Might nodded to her in acceptance, then turned to face the approaching Ida, who had already reached them while Kaminari was still rushing down the stairs. The armored student came to a stop right in front of the group, standing straight as he addressed the pro-hero. Sir, I was wondering if you needed any help extracting my fellow students from the premises. All Might quirk a brow at the boy, surprising him by giving a small shake of his head. Noble, young Ida, but unnecessary. The UA faculty will be right behind me, recovery girl among them. I'd rather you remain with them here, protecting them from any wayward villains until the faculty arrives. Ida's mouth fell open slightly at the order, before snapping to a crisp salute. I shall follow your orders to the letter, All Might, sir. All Might's grin widened at the boy's earnestness. Good man. He met the eyes of each of his students, before facing away from them, eyes locking onto the nearest villains lurking in the distance. Keep each other safe for just a little while longer. In the meantime, he cracked his knuckles, his smile gaining an edge that sent a chill down the spine of every villain within eyeshot. I shall go deal with the remaining riffraff. In a burst of wind, All Might blurred away, the shouts of surprised and frightened villains soon following. With the knowledge that All Might was now in the building, the Nomu being defeated or rather turned to dust, and their fellow students were being rescued, Ochako slumped as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She couldn't help but brushed a few strands from out of Izuku's face, tenderly staring at his sleeping face. Ida, along with Kirishima and Kaminari, went towards Ochako, wondering what occurred when she fused with Izuku. Todoroki watched both Ochako and Izuku in rapt attention. Ochako, who lay there, who was hurt the most, and yet she still had the energy to joke with the boys while occasionally brushing Izuku's hair. Todoroki looked with narrowed eyes at Ochako's annoyed but calm expression and Izuku's careless slumber. The longer she watched them, the more she felt something hot curdle in her gut, twisting uncomfortably and growing in intensity. She turned away from them, ignoring the mindless chatter that sprung up more, which only grew louder once Aoyama and Hagakure appeared running down from the mountaintop. She instead watched as All Might darted around the USJ at insane speeds, creating a steadily growing pile of unconscious villains in the center of the destroyed plaza. She watched with a calculating stare, trying to figure out how she could surpass both All Might and even Izuku's power that seemed to evolve even more. Meanwhile, a certain blonde-haired young man, who woke up not too long ago, watched it. He watched the battle that should have belonged to him. He was supposed to have the cheers from the extras that were in his class. He was supposed to hear All Might worried about him, who has the power of the greatest hero in Japan. So why was he seeing that delusional freak having things that belonged to him? With his hands clenching, with his quirk sparking in his hands. Deku, I'll kill you. I'll kill you. Izuku didn't know where he washed, didn't know where exactly it was to begin with, but then he heard Ida's sound not that far from him, someone screaming. As if they were hurt. With that, Izuku was suddenly pushed away by an unknown force from out of nowhere, but that didn't stop him to stare ahead into the darkness and saw glowing red eyes and a large smile that set shivers down his spine. See ya around, little one. And then Izuku opened his eyes with his body rising up while sweat poured down his face. He looked around to see he was in a clinic until he goes through his memories of what happened with a groan from the pain he was inflicted by his reckless action alone. He sighed as he laid back down, as he let sleep take over, as he still felt that most of his injuries still hurt. Just what was that thing? He thought as he finally let his body rest. It was after the events of the USJ incident was where we see All Might in his small form with the school nurse recovery girl in the office of Principal Nizu, who was drinking his tea the way. Toshinori, did you see the files on Nomu and his quirks? Recovery girl asked, as she wasn't sure if All Might was up to speed on what the police was able to find out. Quirks? As in more than one? Toshinori asked in disbelief, with his blue eyes widened. Take a look at it yourself. Recovery girl handed Toshinori the documents regarding Nomu's powers. As Toshinori went through them, his levels of shock kept on increasing and increasing with every single page he read. By the time he was finished, he almost found it impossible to form words in his mouth. He was speechless to the core. What is this? Abomination. From what the investigators had gathered from the villains they were able to capture, they learned that the Nomu was specifically constructed to kill you. He had quirks implanted in him that were supposed to be direct counters for you. It is a miracle that no other student had major injuries besides Midoriya. Recovery girl said, as she too couldn't believe that a being like Nomu existed. It seemed as though he wasn't even human anymore. Toshinori handed the documents back to Recovery girl as he stood up from his chair. I think I need some time to take all of this in. He then walked out and closed the door. He stood there in the hallway for a good minute as he thought about all that has happened in the past few days. So you're still out there? All for one. He said this with his hands clenched. I need to tell young Bakugathese is also his responsibility as the successor of One for All. Right now Izuku was seen in his room after the events of USJ, along with his mom worried about him and having a sort of an understanding towards his power. Izuku couldn't help but sigh as he got out of bed and grabbed some clothing to head out for a bit while telling his mother he'll be going for a walk. A few minutes went by and we see Izuku staring at the moving waves that clashed at each other. The more he watched, the more he felt at peace, but that disappeared as he clenched his fist. Something is wrong with Medhat voice, whatever it was, is it my power? Izuku thought. As his eyes glowed, but he didn't know that in fact the usual white-like glow he has wasn't there, because right now the color was dark red. A few days went by and it was the day where the students of UA High come back to school after the USJ incident, and this was where we see Izuku Midoriya walking towards his classroom having a tired-like look on his face. I still haven't got over what I did during USJ, and I can't even piece up any of my memories. It's as if the harder I try, the more broken up those pieces becomes, he thought as he finally got to his class. But as soon as he entered, he quickly noticed that there was a certain tension in the room on this Monday. None of them drew attention to it, but there was no way he was the only one to notice how the ones who tensed when asked what it was like seeing Nomu up close, or how their eyes sharpened and smiles lessened when asked where they ended up during USJ. And Izuku could have sworn that Todoroki was staring intently at him when his back was turned. The whole subject seems like some kind of taboo, like talking about the attack would make it happen again. But they were all still curious. And it being the first time they were all together after the incident, no amount of uncertainty could stop the questions from spilling out. Even Izuku himself couldn't help his curiosity as they swapped stories, listening to the creative ways his classmates fought and asking for them to clarify or expand certain things. Which of course led to them questioning him in turn, mostly about him fusing with Ochako. With this made him surprised while accepting to answer their questions with a smile on his face. But he did smiled when Kirishima started up about how manly the whole thing was. However, the fun stopped when Kaminari started speculating about what his own power when he used one of the fusion's powers and wondered if he can do possible fusions with his other classmates, triggering a debate between him, Kirishima, and Shiro about possible combinations with Izuku. While Izuku was at first just as invested as they were with hypothesizing, he felt like if he fused with more people his skin crawled, and he paled the second Kaminari, and Shiro turned to him and asked if they could try fusing later that day. Izuku froze under their expectant smiles, unsure how to explain how he couldn't use his quirk. 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 in turn caused him to see an image of those same eyes, and it made him sweat as if those eyes were judging him. When Izuku tried to tell them he wasn't sure it was a good idea, but his savior came to his rescue while giving those who asking him a glare. Alright guys, that's enough. It's obvious Izuku isn't okay with the fact him fusing with others will lead to some complications, so let's just drop it for now until he's more comfortable with human fusion. Ochako said this towards them, who nodded their heads while apologizing to Izuku, which he understood while thanking Ochako. All Okao did was smile. Izuku count that it was forced, which made him wanted to ask her what was wrong, but he didn't have much time, nor were the others who could dwell on the previous week's events. On their first day back, the class was informed by Aizawa how the man was already up and moving despite 60% of his body being broken and bandaged. Mystified, impressed, and slightly terrified Izuku for just a few seconds that the UA Sports Festival was rapidly approaching. This alone made Izuku excited for the future, but also brought a new worry to the forefront of his mind. The mob of students that soon appeared outside their homeroom didn't help that worry, nor the piercing words that brought determination from Izuku of a purple-haired Gen Ed student. As the final hour indicated that school was over, this leads to Izuku standing on the white sands of the beach that was once filled with trash, now back to its former glory as the water hit the ground and forming waves while glistening on its surface from the rays of the sun. But Izuku wasn't here for the scenery, even though he doesn't mind to bring Ochako to this place, just the two of them. He blushed while shaking his head at that thought that surfaced his mind and getting serious. Alright, as far as I know, my quirk lets me not only fuse with inorganic materials but also the elements and human fusion. These components may look simple, but it's complex, and now there's this other power. I got the gist of what my classmates told me, how I was able to take down the Nomu with a fire-like power where it looked like it increased my speed and strength. But is that it? This thing, that creature that I saw, what exactly does it want from me? Let's not focus on that, but let's focus on what I'm capable of doing, and right now I need to the element fusion. When Izuku finished his deduction, he got ready to train for these 2 weeks with his eyes glowing in power as a powerful wind surrounded him, with his hair moving as if they have mind of their own. Meanwhile, on one of the training grounds in UA was where we see Katsuki Bakugo and All Might in his skeleton form. Bakugo breathing heavily while trying to keep OFA active, but for some reason it was like the quirk itself wasn't listening to his command, and it caused him to get angry, with All Might encouraging him to see the positive side and keep training to win OFA. But that alone didn't help Bakugo, since right now all his mind has ever fixated on was Izuku, and his mind held nothing but hate towards the boy. Being humiliated from time to time, and now seeing Izuku with a brand new power was causing not only his ego but his pride as well to crack. Plus, I swear I'll destroy you. Because of that, Something happened. In a dark area, the same creature that found Izuku interesting saw a large metal door formed where there were 9 locks were there, as so were keys that were ready to be turned. This didn't sit well with the creature as it glared at the door. "How disgusting," the creature said as watched the light behind the door getting dim little by little. The sound of the waves were heard along with that came with them being split into more than 2 and showing the sand that the sea's water covered it. Izuku, who was busy catching his breath while his eyes glowed because of him using his element fusion, constantly pushing the limit on using the one element he's used to and trying to overcome the limit. But he knew it wasn't enough as he stared at the water before him and had an idea. Well, no point in turning back now. As soon as he said, he started to walk towards the water, feeling it touching his feet as his eyes glowed even more as he felt his body changed. Mizu. And with that, Izuku's appearance changed as his hair became a light like blue color with his eyes having the color of aqua. He stared at his hands as he droplets of water floating around his fingers with swift movements, and then he walked more into the water as if the water itself was the ground and he had no difficulty walking on it. A few steps turned into a jog, then it turned into a run, and then he started to sprint on the water with speed. This continued on as Izuku increased his speed even more while using the waves and sliding across the water as if he was surfing. The more Izuku focused on the element fusion, the more it was getting to him as he had to put more effort into not getting hit by the many waves coming his way. His eyes glowed even stronger as he changed from the water element towards the wind element as he focused on pushing upwards towards the sky and using mid-air attacks with precision and focus. A few minutes he continued until he let gravity take over and caused him to fall towards the waters until at the last second he used the wind give him a slight jump and switched towards the water element and started to slide across the water, not knowing that steam was producing from his legs. 2 weeks passed in the blink of an eye. Before Izuku knew it, he and his class were standing in the dressing room of one of UA's massive arenas, filled with pro heroes cheering waiting for them to come out. Decked out in their PE clothes, the 19 of them chatted as they waited for Ida to arrive, since he insisted on being the one to let them know when they can go into the arena proper, which made Izuku chuckle. But right now Izuku was busy dealing with something he found confusing. It was him kneeling down while being glared by Ochako Uraraka, having a disappointed look from both Momo Yaoyorozu, Kyokajiru, and being given a blank stare from Tsuyu Azui. "So remind me, Izuku, why didn't you tell me to join you during your little experiments where you'll hurt yourself? Why you think it was a good idea to go and fuse for 2 weeks without notifying me?" "Izuku," Ochako said towards the boys. Izuku couldn't even try to look up because if he did, he would cave in by Ochako's eyes. "Well, in his defense, you didn't call him if you wanted to spend time with him, so I think you're kinda at fault for that." The person who said was none other than Minoru Mienta, the same guy who for some reason started to idolize Izuku, with the same boy looking at him with panic on his face. "He made it worse," Izuku shouted inside his mind, with Ochako giving Minoru a glare. "Even so, maybe you should have told Uraraka about your whereabouts in case if you might have overdone it," Momo said while trying hard not to look at Izuku with having tons of questions to ask him. Izuku, who finally raised his head, just smiled towards Ochako. "I'm sorry for not talking to you. Ochako, please let me make it up to you by doing anything you want me to do for you," Izuku said with Ochako, who stood still as she heard this. "After the sports festival, then I'll ask you what I want," Ochako said towards Izuku with Tsuyu. Momo and Kyoka stared at Ochako, who blushed a bit because of what she was thinking, with Izuku just nodding his head. He finally stood up with Minoru nodding his head, which made Izuku tilt his as that. "You're seriously something else, Midoriya. You keep on being amazing," Minoru said with Izuku just saying thanks. Izuku then wondered on something. Wait a minute, wasn't there something that's gonna happen at the beginning of the sports festival? He asked, but it was to himself, but that led to him getting a tap on the shoulder courtesy of Momo. "Well, it's a good thing I'm your vice president, because from what I heard from the teachers and given the situation during the USJ, it's you who was the one that got first place, which means you would be given the speech for the spectators." As soon as that was heard, this made Izuku widen his eyes while sweating. "Congratulations on that, Izuku," Ochako said with Izuku just nodding his head while sweating even more. "Oh wow, that's something. So what's your big plan on this speech of yours, Midoriya?" Kyoka asked them while getting ready to stab Minoru with one of her earphone jacks as he was backing away from Tsuyu because of imminent danger on his person. "I'm not sure," This is a first for me since I've never given any speeches at my old school. Oh, have my ears heard right that Midori is gonna be given a speech? A feminine voice was heard that was filled with energy and mischief that caused Ochako to look at the one who was close to Izuku with an arm wrapped around his shoulder with a smile on her face. "Ashido, what are you doing?" Ochako asked while having a dark tone in her voice, with Mina just giggling while being closer to Izuku, who felt the close proximity from the girl. "What? Can't I be close to the one who's so adorable? I mean, look at this face and tell me you don't want to eat him up," Mina said while her face was close to Izuku's own, who was close to being red. "That doesn't mean you should do that to begin with," saying this while grabbing Izuku from the clutches of Mina, who didn't back down while holding onto Izuku's arm. "Hey, now you're always being so possessive of Midori. Save some for the rest of us. He's not yours to begin with. He only have eyes for one girl, that's me, who he has fused with," Ochako said with a glare while finally having a good hold of Izuku, which resulted in him landed face first in Ochako's beer's tea that caused her to blush, but she didn't let him go, which caused a reaction from the girls, who felt something while the guys could only stare, while some of them wished Izuku good luck with the one who was blushing redder than Kirishima's hair. Izuku didn't deny that he enjoyed how Ochako cared for him, but he had to look up and stare into her eyes as she stared back, and this made her sigh as she let go of the boy but still held him close. "Oh wow, look Uraraka, you just made Midoriya close to passing out." The person who said this was Tsuyu while going towards Izuku, placing a comfortable tap on his shoulder. "You seem nervous, Midoriya." Izuku ducked his head sheepishly, internally thankful for Tsuyu's interaction. "That obvious?" Tsuyu hummed in response. "A little bit. I saw you fidgeting with your hands." Izuku blinked at her, before looking down. Sure enough, his hands were folded over each other, his fingers twitching as they rubbed together nervously. Flushing, Izuku pulled his hands apart, rubbing the back of his head. "Huh, I didn't even notice." At that, Tsuyu just shrugged. "Well, you're still hiding it better than some of us." Ochako looked confused, giving the room a quick once-over. While most everyone seemed a little tense, no one seemed overly worried. She saw Tokoyami and Shoji talking quietly to each other, and Todoroki standing off by herself with her head down. Some of them were even laughing with each other, Kaminari, Shiro, and Sato pumping each other up with large grins, Jiro and Mina rolling their eyes at the antics. "Everyone seems okay," Ochako said slowly, a question in her voice. In answer, Tsuyu merely pointed down behind them. Curious, Izuku, Minoru, Momo, Kyoka and Ochako along with Mina followed her, and they stared at Katsuki Bakugo with him having his legs on the table with his arms crossed, with his face having a look of hate, with his hands twitching every few seconds. Izuku just sighed. "Honestly, if it's him, I don't want to know what he's thinking if he's that mad." Ochako could just nod towards Izuku for that. But the entire class jumped at the door was suddenly thrown violently open, most of the class halfway into their fighting stances as they instinctually faced the intruder. "Everyone!" came Ida's strong voice as he stepped into the room with an intense expression. "Finish your preparations. They're almost ready for us to." He trailed off when he heard a collection of groans from the class facing him. He blinked as he watched them relax out of their tense positions. "Dude," Jiro said, putting her hands on her hips in annoyance. "Do you gotta burst in here like there's a fire or something? We're stressed enough as is." Ida shot to attention in an instant, his eyes wide. "Oh dear." He bent at the waist. "My most sincere apologies, everyone. It was not my intention to." "Sheesh." Minoru grumbled as he sank back into his chair, letting out a huff as he tuned out Ida's profuse apologies. "That guy needs to relax." Ochako giggled. As for Izuku, he couldn't help but chuckle lightly at the situation here as he was calming down, while going through the many ideas in his head. It wouldn't be long before, Midoriya. A cold voice cut through the relaxed mood, making him turn around. Izuku blinked. Todoroki. Todoroki stood just behind him, her mismatched eyes zeroed in on Izuku. Her face was blank, save for the slightest narrowing of her eyes. A moment of silence stretched on, prompting Izuku to ask, "Do you need something?" Todoroki simply stared for a moment longer, the silent treatment making Izuku wonder what she wanted until Todoroki finally spoke. "It seems to me that you're a very interesting person for someone who hates All Might." Izuku could just narrow his eyes when he heard this from Miyuki Todoroki's blunt statement. Ochako's eyes felt like they were close to do something to the ice and fire user while Momo, Mina, Tsuyu, Kyoka and Minoru tensed, feeling the tension in the air when they saw the way Izuku looked at Todoroki. "And why exactly do you mean by that, Todoroki?" Izuku asked, trying to hold in his anger. Todoroki's gaze intensified, as if insulted that Izuku was playing dumb. "At the US or rather at the starts of our first day in UA, you've had nothing but hate towards All Might, and once you came to unconsciousness, he focused on making sure you were okay before anyone else." Izuku wondered why that big oaf was worried about him, that it sickened him just at the mere thought of it. But before he could say anything, Minoru stepped in. Of course he focused on Midoriya first. He was the most beat up out of all of us. Todoroki slowly turned her gaze towards Minoru, her gaze growing colder. Minoru himself would have felt nervous, but right now he just stood his ground, the tension in the air rising by the second. Hoping to curb an oncoming brawl, Izuku asked, "Is there something you wanted to say, Todoroki?" Todoroki's eyes snapped back to Izuku, her battle of wills with Minoru forgotten, much to the small stature boy's ire. "Just making an observation," Todoroki said calmly. "Though, I was hoping you could clarify something for me." The half-and-half girl's tone put Izuku on edge, but he tried to smile anyway even though it was forced, and that is, "I just wanted to know if you're actually going to compete today or just be a burden by thinking of using your fusion to do it for you." Izuku's smile suddenly disappeared on his face. The room suddenly seemed much quieter. "What?" he said softly. This made Minoru to be vocal, jumping to his feet as he glared. "The hell is that supposed to mean, Freezerburn?" "I wasn't talking to you, midget," Todoroki said dismissively, not even looking at Minoru, who felt a vein popping on his forehead. "What?" Minoru got offended by that and started to move forward towards Todoroki, only be lifted by none other than Tsuyu, who was using her tongue and pulling him back with him, thrashing in anger, "Let me go, damn it." Tsuyu didn't say anything but continued to pull him back while observing the situation. Todoroki paid them no mind, her calm visage betrayed by the intense gaze he kept on Izuku. "Well, Midoriya." Izuku couldn't help but feel his eyes narrowing even more, that if anyone sees this it would seem that Izuku was close to bust a vein, overly aware of the eyes of his classmates watching them. "What do you mean, Todoroki?" Todoroki's gaze intensified, irritation growing. "Since school started, every major success you've had has been the result of you fusing. You used Uraraka's power to pass the entrance exam. You used other materials to fuse with to win your first hero class, and then fused either Uraraka, and not to mention you fused with Uraraka again and somehow gain a boost in strength during the USJ attack." Izuku felt something snapped, and he didn't like what Todoroki's been implying during her conversation. "You're considered one of the strongest students in our class, but I have to ask, what exactly have you done to earn it?" Despite the calm voice Todoroki spoke in, Izuku took the girl's words like physical blows, his shoulders hunching at each accusation. And feeling those memories coming back to him, the urge to forget them, to run away from them, to destroy them, and he knew that Ochako felt his emotions. Izuku stood straight up and glared at the girl as his eyes had a faint glow to them. "That's not really fair, Todoroki." Todoroki merely rose an unimpressed brow. "Isn't it? You have plenty of power on your own with your material absorption and the strength it gives you. Instead, but it looks to me that you choose more often than not to use other people's power instead of your own." Ochako let out an irate growl. "He ain't using others, you dash." Todoroki cut her off with a sharp look, her mismatched eyes darting at Ochako, the girl glaring at Todoroki. "Then what do you call him using your strength to better himself?" Teamwork," Ochako said with a confused little shrug, nonplussed. "That ain't even how his fusions works," Minoru defended Izuku as he glared at Todoroki. "He's right, and besides, I won't be fusing with Amy-1 today." At that, Todoroki blinked, genuinely surprised. "He won't." Taking a chance at Todoroki's lapse in fury, Izuku quickly explained. "I don't want to get too used to fusing with Ochako. You're right, I'd probably get through the competition a lot easier if I fused with her or others who wanted to join, but that's not really the point of today. I won't always be able to fuse with someone when I'm a hero, So I want to try and get as far as I can on my own first before resorting to human fusion. Todoroki's eyes narrowed, the air in the room growing cooler. So you are going to fuse with someone else? What? Yeah, maybe. Izuku gave a nonchalant shrug. I'm going to try and do as much as I can by myself, but if I get stuck and someone's willing to team up. Todoroki scoffed. So you'll just use someone else's power? Izuku just had about enough of this girl and took a deep breath, changing his look for just a few seconds and blitzed towards Todoroki and got into her face, causing her to take a step back from his action, but Izuku grabbed her by the collar and glared at her with looks of irritation. That's just how my power works. What do you want me to do? Only use half of my power. He took a step back because of the way Todoroki's face changed, her eyes shot wide, her lips pulling into a tight line. Her hands clenched until they shook, frost coating her right hand. Everyone shivered as the room grew colder still. Izuku, still in his element fusion, stared at the girl, not feeling any hint of being scared of her, just irritated. Suddenly, a head of spiky red hair appeared between Todoroki and the trio, Kirishima throwing his arms out wide to keep the distance. He looked quickly between Todoroki and Izuku, his attempt at a pacifying smile somewhat ruined by the nervousness on his face. You're all acting supermanly or womanly right now, but how about you save it for just a little longer? There's a whole stadium of people here to watch us compete, and it ain't going to do any of us any good if you both get kicked out now. I must agree. Ida concurred as he approached the standoff, looking disapproving between the participants. This is hardly appropriate behavior for future heroes, especially before such a major event. I must ask for you all to cease hostilities before I'll be forced to bring the faculty into this. Izuku simply deactivated his element fusion, but he did had a hand placed flat against the table, ready to absorb it at any moment. He removed his hand and glared at the girl with determination on his face. Todoroki glared back, eyes darting between Minoru and Izuku. Her fists shook, ice creeping up her right arm as the seconds ticked by. Then, as quickly as it had come, the tension in Todoroki's body bled away, her fists unclenching. The girl let out a derisive scoff. Fine, she said, her voice still frighteningly calm. Do what you want. It won't matter anyway. She turned her full attention to Izuku. No matter how strong your fusions are, I'm still stronger. And I'll prove it to everyone out there when I crush you. He turned his intent gaze on Ochako. And whoever's foolish enough to tie themselves to you. Ochako looking startled and hurt, but Todoroki paid her no mind. She sent Izuku one last glare before turning around and walking right out of the room past Ida, who watched her go with stunned eyes. Before Todoroki disappeared around the corner, Izuku felt like he should say something. But he just sighed, not even feeling the need to say a word towards the girl, as it seems she was out of sight. Yeesh. Izuku jumped at the sudden voice next to him, turning to find that Mina had snuck up behind him. The acid girl giggled at the look on his face. For a second there I really thought you two were going to go at it. She gave Izuku a grin. Forget what Todoroki said. I don't know about everyone else, but if you need a fusion between you and me today, I'm up for it. Izuku blinked in surprise. Oh. Same for me, man. Kirishima's then said, giving Izuku a sharp-toothed grin as he turned to face him. Don't know who we'd make, but you got him if you want him. A warm feeling bloomed in Izuku's chest, which only grew when he saw Tsuyu flash him a thumbs up. An impulsive part of him wanted to turn around to look at Momo, but he quashed it down, already feeling overwhelmed. See how the day goes. He finally said with a sheepish smile, rubbing the back of his head as he felt his cheeks warm. Ida said, looking between the budding pseudo-alliance in bemusement. Thank you for trying to play peacemaker, Kirishima, and for not escalating things further, Midoriya, Mineta. If the Ice Queen didn't back down, I'm pretty sure Midoriya would have put her through a wall, Minoru said plainly, much to Ida's stunned ire, finally putting his arms down. He turned to Izuku, fire still in his eyes. You get the chance, Midoriya, you better kick her butt. Isn't that against for guys to hit girls? Izuku said with Minoru smirking. It's only fair, besides to me I'm a guy who agrees with gender equality, so it don't matter if a girl thinks she can get away with a slap, then be prepared to get punched. Izuku could only sigh at Minoru's antics, but he just smiled and he appreciated. Bakugo, who saw the shit show, just clicked his tongue and got out of his seat, which caused the rest of the class to see him walking until he glared at them all. What the F are you F-airs looking at, huh? If you want to stay on your asses, then be my guest, less extras to fight. The blonde's words sent the class into a flurry of motion, finishing their last-minute preparations before moving towards the exit, Ida rushing ahead to try and get Todoroki to wait for them. As they filed out, Ochako sided up to Izuku, giving him a concerned look. "You okay, Izuku?" Izuku blinked at her concern until he saw her tap the side of her head. He took a steadying breath, giving her a grin. "I'm fine, Ochako." Some of the stuff she said just hit a little close to home. "I know," she returned sadly. When Izuku's smile didn't falter, Ochako managed to smile back, before frowning. "I wonder what Todoroki's problem is. Was it just me, or did she seem really angry about your quirk?" Ahead of them, they heard Minoru snort. "Ice Queen's got issues." As the class reached the end of the hall, they could hear the roar of the gathered heroes outside, present mixed commentary pumping up the crowd. Sunlight filled the exit up ahead, Ida and Todoroki waiting for them just before the threshold. Once they reached them, Todoroki shot Izuku one last look over her shoulder before walking forward, 1A following her. Izuku breathed out the last of his nerves, stepping out into the light as in his mind 2 red eyes was watching, and it couldn't help but be intrigued. And here they are, ladies and gentlemen. The intrepid lads and ladies that have already proven their mettle against the forces of a villain attack. Welcome to the stage, Class 1A. Plus, the sports festival had begun. That's right, folks. This is our class of rising stars who survived a major villain attack. Their iron wills remain strong as ever. Class 1A. Cheers present mic from the announcer's booth. The stadium was packed full of people. There have to be thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people in the stands cheering wildly as Izuku and Class 1A step out onto the pitch. A wild company of adoration and excitement. "Whoa," he says, "there's so many people. Indeed, drawing out our best performances with so many eyes in every direction will be a true challenge for us," says Ida. "They're really hyping us up," says Kirishima. "I'm starting to get nervous." "Don't be such a f-wuss," says Bakugo. The other classes emerge from their designated tunnels along the side of the stadium, meeting up with Class 1A. "Next up is our other heroics class, 1B, present Mike says. And following them are classes C, D, and E from our Department of General Education. And now here comes classes F, G, and H from our support course. And our management course's very own." Izuku tunes out the class announcements. It's clear present Mike wasn't going to say anything interesting about any of the other classes. That's not really fair. We didn't ask to all nearly die. Izuku unconsciously flexes his right hand. Seems he's not the only one who thinks that present Mike was phoning it in. His ears twitch a bit towards the general education classes as he overhears some chatter. "Man, they're acting like we're just here to hype up 1A, huh? That's pretty F up. We're students too, DMN it." Izuku couldn't help but understand them a bit because of their circumstances, but eventually, all of the classes crossed the pitch to the far side, where a high wooden platform overlooks the field. Standing atop it was Midnight, fully letting her more provocative persona shine through. "I'm expecting you all to play fair, everyone," she says, cracking her WHP to get their attention. The crowd naturally eats it up. Izuku couldn't help but gaze at his teacher, which set off Ochako, who was close to him, and pinched him at his side. "Is it truly fine for the so-called R-rated hero to be here in a high school?" muses Tokoyami. An indignant Midnight squawks at him to be quiet. "There's nothing wrong with my employment," she says, stamping one foot. "Anyway, our player representative is a special case here. Please welcome Izuku Midoriya of 1A. Izuku turning his head towards Yayorozu, who turned her head away with him groaning at this. Izuku just sighed and getting over with his classmates cheering him on while those who were confused on what this 1A student was going to say while walking up the wooden platform. Izuku took a deep breath as he closed his eyes, and then those eyes. Everything was silent. Izuku opened his eyes, but they weren't his usual emerald eyes. They were red as ever, as if when you stare in them you can't look away. Izuku grabbed the mic from Midnight while thanking her, faced forward towards the many eyes that stared at her. Well, this is a surprise for me to being here making a speech, but anyways, hey everyone, the name's Izuku Midoriya and don't forget it. But right now let's not focus on me. Instead I want to say this that comes from my heart. It doesn't matter if others don't believe you. What matters is that you stay true to what you believe in. So first years, let's show the world that we are here. The people in the stands went nuts as they heard the speech from the fusion, while the other classes gave a more subdued level of cheer. Izuku just gave them a wide smile towards them while waving and went back towards his classmates as quickly as he can, though Midnight's pat Izuku on his back with a smile on her face that led to Izuku to smile back only to get pulled by the ear of Ochako. Come on Casanova, we got an event to deal with. She said this with a hint of a pout that dawned her face, which made Izuku chuckle. And with that out of the way, we can move right on to the first event. Midnight calls, cracking her WHP once more. Wow, not even a pause, Ochako murmurs. Behind Midnight, a holographic screen projects, just like the ones from their acceptance letters. The screen spins down a list of games. Our preliminary round. We usually lose a lot of our fine competitors to this one. And this year's first round is, the wheel slows to a stop on obstacle course. That's right. Midnight says. It's a race between all of our first-year classes. It's a 4-kilometer run around the outer ring of the stadium. Behind Midnight was an open stretch, a straight path leading out of the stadium. The wall covering this path slowly unfolds and slides to the sides, leaving the tunnel open for the students. The classes take their positions at the base of the tunnel, where the gate marks a line. As long as you stay on the track, you're free to do whatever you want to move ahead. Let's get started, shall we? Midnight raises her WHP high. On your marks, the lights on the gate blink slowly from red to yellow to green. Start. Time to win and feast. Everyone instantly tries to rush ahead, but the tunnel was too narrow. The crowd itself becomes an obstacle as people get shooed together. Izuku was seen leaping up and over the heads of everyone around him. With his leg strength along with using wind filament fusion, he bounced off one wall to build up the speed and the momentum he needs to run along the other. And not a moment too soon. Todoroki freezes over the ground, immobilizing everyone else as she skates ahead. But this doesn't stop Izuku, and he knew neither did his classmates. They burst free from the icy grip only a moment later, rushing ahead of the trapped students. As the tunnel ends, Izuku springs off, landing in a roll and rushing ahead. He's on Todoroki in no time. I expected some of you to escape, Izuku hears Todoroki say. But more of you made it clear than I thought. But Izuku wasn't looking at his icy classmate. He's looking just past her, where a pair of familiar robots are charging towards them. The entrance exam robots. And not just the small ones. Izuku's mouth drops slightly open as he sees at least a dozen of zero-pointers blocking the progress of the competitors. And here we are, already at the first obstacle. The Robo Inferno. So this is what they used for the general entrance exam, huh? Todoroki says, coming to a halt. As she crouches to press her right hand to the ground, Izuku darts past her. What's this? Midoriya just tore past Todoroki with no hesitation. Calls out present mic as a strong Arctic wind blows across Izuku's spine. The massive wave of ice freezing the robot solid is just centimeters behind him. Izuku hears someone behind call out. He's frozen him. We can get through. I wouldn't, says Todoroki conversationally. They're off balance. They're about to dash. The massive crash makes Izuku grunt out. There's a slight ringing in his ears as he keeps moving through the pain. Compared to what he faced at the USJ, at 𝐴LDR, some loud noises are nothing to him. Todoroki simultaneously moved ahead while blocking everyone behind him. What a brutal move. I'd call it unfair, but she's still in second. Present Mic's voice rings out over them. He continues talking about the progress of Izuku's classmates. Several of them manage to clear the Robo Inferno with little difficulty, from the sound of it. As expected, says Present Mic, most of the students who've made it through are from 1A. It's not that the other classes are inferior, says Mr. Aizawa. It's that 1A has learned the hard way that there's no time to stay dead in their tracks. They've faced a real life or death scenario, and they survived. And that experience has taught them all to not hesitate. Izuku kept moving ahead, pushing himself faster, faster. He feels it, the power of the element he was fusing with, the power coiling through his body. The sensation of pushing himself to his limits. I can't give Todoroki the chance to stop me. I need more distance. I want to win. Izuku thought as his eyes glowed a vibrant red and a smile started to form on his face. Wow, Midoriya is even faster than Iida, and he doesn't have engines in his legs. 𝗵𝗃 says. That's not quite true, Mr. Aizawa counters. Midoriya's top speed is lower than Iida's, but he compensates with better acceleration. You mean he does better from a standing start? Is it because he uses his quirk similar to a starting engine at full throttle? 𝗵𝗃 simplifies for the crowd. Precisely. And with the obstacles on the course, I doubt we'll actually see either of their top speeds. Izuku blinks as the next obstacle comes into view. It's a deep pit with stone pillars rising from the dark abyss. There are small ropes connecting each of them, seemingly at random. But Izuku doesn't need to deal with those ropes. Because of his constant use of the element fusion that's now circulating his legs, his eyes glowed with power. And it seems Midoriya's at the second obstacle. And if the Robo Inferno was easy, then what do you think about this? One slip and you're out. It's the fall, says 𝗵𝗃. If you think he'll struggle with this, you clearly weren't paying attention, says a bored Eraserhead. Izuku runs as far as he can. At the very edge of the first stone platform, he leaps to the nearest small one, putting more power into his leg strength as he leaps once more. Constant flow of wind circulating like the BLD that's in my body. Focus, embrace it. Use like an extension. Izuku shouted in his mind as he leaps even more with a smile dawning on his face. And Midoriya's just leapt across the whole thing, says 𝗵𝗃. His lead is nearly astronomical at this point. Can anyone catch up to that speedster? Well, the next obstacle should slow him down, Eraserhead says. Izuku nearly misses a step. What's that supposed to mean? He pushes himself to go even faster, feeling his leg muscles bulging and his lungs screaming. And the pack has reached the fall. With Todoroki and Bakugo in hot pursuit of Midoriya's first place spot. Izuku rounds the bend, seeing wooden posts and barbed wire on the outside of the track. And then he sees the sign on the far side of the track, a picture of a skull with a cartoon explosion behind it. Izuku's eyes widened as he pales. Is that really it? And Midoriya's reached the minefield, says 𝗵𝗃, unintentionally answering Izuku's silent question. If you look carefully, you can even see where they're buried. But speed won't help you here. You gotta take a good look. Those landmines may not be lethal, but they'll knock you around. Izuku scans over the ground in front of him as he approaches the minefield and then felt his hold onto the element he was using diminished as he bent down and taking a knee as he started to sweat. Dimminute, I pushed too hard and I'm so close, but right now I gotta focus in front of me. Where's the safe spaces? Where's the mines? The end of 𝗵𝗃's spiel fades away into inaudible nonsense. Izuku took a breath focused as he took a breath, but that led to him coughing up as his hold on his power faded, cussing him to panic. No, not now. Dimminute. He thought as he tried to focus, but to no avail. It made him clench his teeth in frustration. My, this is a first. As soon as Izuku heard that voice, his subconscious was facing the being whose eyes were staring at him with curiosity. What do you want? Izuku asked, only for the being to get closer to Izuku. What I want is for you to use your power more. What are you talking about? I am you dash. But he was stopped by a force that part-heat him done to the ground, caused him to struggle to get up. I'm talking about you using your so-called element fusion on something rather than wind. Your proficiency towards that certain element is good, but you rarely use the other elements like earth, fire, water, and even the sub-elements. You have the power to use them, but your imagination is limited. Perhaps helping you will give you the boost you need, but that will be like a clutch for you. The being said to the downed Izuku to raise his head up towards the being, almost seeing its silhouette in darkness that it made the being to widen in surprise. "Oh no, that's interesting. Alright then, since you're almost seeing myself, then I'll allow you a portion of the power that you deserve, but use it all up," being said as it let Izuku get up from the ground and plunged something into Izuku's chest, causing him to scream in pain as his eyes glowed red. Izuku's eyes opened as he saw that he was back in the world of the living, but he felt strange, but he can wait in that because right now he's got a race to win. As he took a deep breath, he felt his body become more connected and more from with the ground. As his thoughts transverse, feeling an element that he never used sinking through his very being and using it to focus on his foot and smack it against the ground and feeling the vibrations from his body like an echo. There's a cluster right in front of him, but a small spot right in the middle of them with no minds. It feels like forever, but he springs off from that spot. Izuku's eyes dart across the ground, passing lazily below him. He spots another opening and presses off from it. He's about halfway across the mind field when he realizes that everything still feels so slow. His movements, the air, his breathing. He can't even make out any sounds other than his own footsteps. Every noise echoes deep and quiet. He wondered on why was this the case. He might have known, or rather doesn't want to know, and whatever element he's fusing with it better keep him from getting left behind. As Izuku started to jump around and across the edge of the minefield with the ground giving him the boost he needed to clear the minefield seemingly effortlessly. Incredible! Midoriya made it all the way through without slowing for a second. Present Mike yells. "Deku!" Comes the all-too-familiar yelling behind him, punctuated by explosions. "You get your sorry but back here." This made Izuku sigh in frustration as he kept on running, or rather, he glided on the ground as the ground itself was moving with his feet movements as he pushed forward and kicking up massive loads of dust. He glided on the ground as the ground itself was moving with his feet movements as he pushed forward and kicking up massive loads of dust. The explosions get more frequent and Izuku heard the sound of burst of wind from behind him that made him turn his head to see Bakugo setting off explosion with lightning arcs forming around him as he screamed at Izuku, but Izuku didn't care as he pushed forward even more and launched himself in the air as his eyes glowed even more and screamed out, "Ibaretto!" with a burst of speed that pushed him even further away from Bakugo, with the latter widening his eyes in disbelief. "No, closer." That's what he was thinking as the stadium was right there. He just has to reach it. Izuku bursts out of the gate and back onto the wide open pitch. Plus, and here he is, our near uncontested winner of the first round. Midoriya Izuku has made it back to the stadium first. Izuku's breathing was heavier than when he started running. He shakes his head, feeling as if his body was about to collapse. Well, that was interesting but mediocre at best, Izuku heard in his psyche, but he couldn't think about that right now since he needed to intake enough oxygen in his body to not hit the floor hard. Second and third crossed the line in what's nearly a photo finish. Calls present Mike. Izuku gave a glance behind him to see Todoroki and Bakugo, both heaving air into their lungs. The air around Todoroki drifts off, a cool white mist. Izuku's ear twitches as Bakugo snarls under his breath. "Again! God damn it." Bakugo tightens his hand into a fist, his other hand clasping vice-like around his arm. And here comes the pack. Booms present Mike. They're coming it at a steady pace now. Those of you in the audience, we're compiling the results now. Enjoy your short breather. Izuku fully intends on that, but it was short-lived when he was suddenly pushed down by the body of something soft and a nice scent, and seeing who it was causes him to smile. "Glad to see you, but could you get up, Ochako?" Izuku said as Ochako stared at him for a few seconds and listened to him and got off of Izuku and helping him up. "Wow, Izuku, you're full of surprises. The way how you used earth to bend at your will, was that the first time you've done it?" Ochako asked Izuku with him nodding his head, confirming Ochako's question. "I'm not sure if I'm able to use it well, but I'll deal with it after the sports festival and maybe the two of us can hang out," Izuku bashfully said, with Ochako blushing a bit, and accepted his invitation to hang out with the duo, staring at Ida, who was looking at his hands lamenting his place in sixth. They couldn't help but hold in their laughs as best as they can at Ida's predicament. It got short-lived when Izuku saw the look of hate that came from Bakugo, and he wondered why the BSRD has a need to stare him down. Ochako, who saw this, glared at the explosion quirk user while flipping him off, which aggravated him before he could attempt to do something. The sound of a platform being raised along with the sound of a WHP was heard, courtesy of Midnight, who gained everyone's attention. And so the first round is over. Only the top 42 participants make it into the second round. Everyone hears the results. Izuku doesn't read past the first 10. With himself at first, there are another 7 1A students in the top 10, the 4th and 5th place students being unfamiliar, presumably Class 1B. With 42 participants, that's enough for all of Class 1A and 1B, as well as 3 others. Since Izuku doesn't know anyone in Class 1B, he'd only recognize 19 names anyway. He does, however, scan for the one with similar hair as his sensei, and remembering his name, he saw that the purple-haired boy sits comfortably at 26th place. And those are the ones who earn the right to advance. Calls a winking Midnight. I'm sorry to those of you who failed, but we've still got quite a bit in store. Moving right along to the second round. From here on out the competition will really turn some heads, so give it your all. Midnight throws her arm back to gesture to the large holographic screen. The next heart-pounding event. Behold! Human cavalry battle, that's a team game, Kero, says Azui. How will that work? Let me explain, says Midnight. You'll form teams of 2 to 4 people however you want, and someone will be the rider. Just like a normal human cavalry battle. The riders wear headbands, and you have to go swipe them while guarding your own. But there's a catch. Midnight leans forward and winks. Everyone will have their own score value based on how well they did at the obstacle course. That should be straightforward enough, says Sato. And each team's point value is dependent on those who reside on that team, Tokoemi says. Hey! Midnight stomps, cracking her WHP. Giving the rules is my job. She coughs into her hand. But here's how it works. The person in 42nd place is worth 5 points. 41st is worth 10. 40th is worth 15, and so on. With one exception. Izuku stills. He just knows this was going to be bad for him. First place, says Midnight, has their own point value. Izuku braces. That person is worth 10 million points. He was wrong earlier. This was how something was gonna bite him HRD on his nice butt. Not killed by villains, but devoured by his classmates like sharks smelling BLD. Those 10 million points is all you need to guarantee you get into the next round. This is a chance for those of you at the bottom to reach the top. A survival game. Izuku tries his best not to wince under the weight of everyone staring at him. As it was, he can't help that he felt lightheaded, with the silence was worse, as everyone takes him in and tries to assess if they can take him. Getting to the top just made me a bigger target, Izuku thought while feeling a headache coming along. Your time limit is 15 minutes. Midnight says. Your group's headband is worth the sum total of your group's points. And your rider has to wear the headband. You have to have it either around your neck or higher. Gotta keep it somewhere easy to yank. And the most important rule. Even if you get your headband taken, you aren't out of the game. That puts about 14 different horses on the field throughout the entire game, Yaoyorozu says, lightly cupping her chin. Guess that means there's less incentive to be defensive, says Ishido. But if you lose your points, Kero, you'll have a harder time keeping track of the scores, Azui responds. Midnight waves her riding CRP in an overhead arc. Quirks are allowed, of course, she says. I want to see you guys trying your hardest out there. But that being said, attacking a team and deliberately trying to break them up will get you disqualified. With one last crack of her WHP, Midnight declares, you have 15 minutes until game start. Being negotiating. In some ways, Izuku was lucky. He doesn't have to worry about offense right out of the gate. Ideally, he'll never need to worry about offense. Which means he wants a defensive strategy. He has a couple of ideas, some of them are a work in progress. Despite having a whole 15 minutes to plan, teams start forming fast. Todoroki and Bakugo got swarmed pretty fast by people desperate for their power. Todoroki seems to have her own plan though, and people quickly shift to only asking Bakugo. But there seems to be some kind of tension, even with the people Bakugo picks. Izuku Ochako says, "Do you want to team up?" "Really?" Izuku asked with Ochako nodding her head. We'll be a pretty big target, that's fine, she says. We just have to survive and we're guaranteed to win. Besides, she beams, I'd rather team up with you anyway. That's perfect. Izuku says brightly. I wanted you on my team. I've got a few other people in mind too. Unfortunately, Ida doesn't share Ochako's opinion. Not that Izuku can blame him. Ida wants to prove himself on his own merits. After all, Izuku was on the top now. Everyone here was his enemy. Todoroki's cold declaration in the waiting room comes back to Izuku. He swallows. No interest in making friends was Todoroki already planning to isolate herself at the top. 10 million. Cries a voice which made Izuku turn around to find a pink dreadlock girl in front of him with only centimeters away from his face. Oh, I remembered you. You're that guy who placed that order to crested a support item that's connected to your quirk. Yep, that's me. Izuku says while backing away from the girl who introduced herself as Mei 𝗵𝗲. Can you get me to the next round? 𝗵𝗲 says. She's got 2 metal bracers with what looks like hinges connecting them to a pair of revolvers on her arms. Izuku blinks a few times before furrowing his brow. He rests his thumb against his lip. With his power and Ochako's quirk, they're pretty set for evasive maneuvers if they start F. Izuku then looks up. What support items do you have? I thought you'd never ask. 𝗵𝗲 says. I've got my electromagnetic 𝗧𝗓𝗓. These babes use an electromagnetic induction to increase mobility. Might even be able to float with them. But if that's not enough, I've got my wonderful jetpack baby. And it doesn't even burn fuel, so it's eco-friendly. I've got wire arrows for grappling around, and of course, my revolver babies. Our revolvers, says Ochako, a hand to her mouth. 𝗵𝗲 nods vigorously. Yup, she says. These bad boys shoot special cartridges of my own design. I can use them to freeze stuff, trap people in nets, and some of them explode. That's perfect. Izuku says, stars in his eyes. There's just one more person I want. Most people have gravitated into their own groups by now. Izuku can see teams starting to form. Ida going with Todoroki hurts a bit, especially with the lineup Todoroki's managed to put together. She grabbed the powerhouses. What Izuku needs right now is someone with good physical strength to keep up with him, and the range to help support 𝗵𝗲. And it looks like the person he has in mind hasn't joined up with anyone yet. Would you be willing to join my team, Tokoyami? Says Izuku. Midoriya, I'll be happy to accept it, he replies. The teams line up in their positions. Look at that eraser, calls Present Mike. The 12 warhorses are out on the field and prep time is almost up. We've got some interesting lineups, Eraserhead says. Raise up your war cries. Present Mike calls. Ochako tightens the Velcro headband as best she can. Izuku makes sure his grip on Tokoyami's hand and shoulder are strong. He can't let Ochako slip. As their rider, she'll have an easier time using her quirk on the team. She's also wearing 𝗵𝗲's jetpack. Let loose the hounds of war, continues Present Mike. Struggle and fight to survive. This is the time for deadly feuds. Fire the signal. Izuku, Tokoyami, 𝗵𝗲. Ochako says, face determined. Let's do this. 3. Midnight counts down. Izuku flicks his gaze to Bakugo's team. Kirishima, Ashido, and Siro don't seem super enthusiastic to be there. 660 points was probably more than enough to get to the next round, but Izuku knows Bakugo will never settle for that. 2. And of course there's Todoroki with 670. Her declaration of war means there's a good chance she's coming straight for him. He hopes Tokoyami will be fine with Todoroki pressuring them. They'll have to keep moving. 1. But the biggest problem was the fabric wrapped around Ochako's head. 10,290 points are currently theirs. The biggest target on the field by a wide margin. Izuku grits his teeth and shifts his footing. They need to be ready to move the moment this game begins as his eyes glowed and while letting out a breath. Start. The words still hang in the air as several teams descend on Midoriya's team. Izuku wasn't expecting hesitation, but even so, their dedication was impressive. Up. Ochako cries, pressing her hands against Izuku and 𝗵𝗲. Izuku doesn't need to be told twice. He and the other two leap off the ground as the dirt below them turns to thick liquid. Izuku grimaces. It would have been a pain to deal with a quirk like that. Airborne. 𝗕𝗏𝗏. Someone says as they pass overhead. Jiro calls 𝐎𝐻𝑒 on it. Her jacks WHP up at the flying group, but Tokoyami was faster. Dark Shadow. He shouted as his sentient quirk that was called Dark Shadow showed himself and used his arms to knock back the attack with no difficulty. Good job, Tokoyami. Hako says. We're coming down. They've gotten some distance now, and the team takes a moment to get their bearings. 𝗎𝗁𝗎's lost her headband somehow, and that's not the only exchange going on. We've got the best evasion here, says Izuku. Let's try to line up the other teams so they hit each other. Brilliant plan, 10 million. 𝗕𝗁𝗲 says. The timing might be tricky, but I think we can do it, Tokoyami says. But then 𝗕𝗁𝗲 felt one of her boots were stuck on something, causing Izuku look and saw an orb that was familiar to him. You guys forgot about me, didn't ya? Someone screamed as more orbs were thrown at Izuku's team, making the team look over with Izuku sweating a bit as they all stare at Minoru, who was standing on Shoji while Tsuyu was inside Shoji, who created a small cave with his dupli arms while running towards the team. Nothing personal, Mineta. Both Ochako and Izuku said as Ochako pressed the button, causing her team to react a bit slow with one of 𝗕𝗁𝗲's boots was destroyed, causing her to cry in dismay while Mineta screamed at them. While the team was in the air and Ochako apologizing for the damage that was caused from 𝗕𝗁𝗲's invention, they focused on their surroundings in case more teams try and take the 10 million from them. And at that moment, Bakugo appears, rocketing towards them from off his horse. Riding a little high there, aren't you? He sneers. Don't be so arrogant. Bakugo extends a hand towards Ochako, who glared at the Pomeranian. Rider, brace, yells 𝗕𝗁𝗲. She whips an arm around and her gun snaps into place in her hand. There's a bang and a net wraps itself around Bakugo. What the? But before he can hit the ground, Zero wraps tape around the bound boy and reels him back in. What an interesting strategy, calls Present Mike. But is it even allowed? As long as he doesn't touch the ground, says Midnight. Let's land and keep moving. Izuku calls. We can't stay long in the air, and neither can we stand around out either. Especially because another horse has caught up to them, which was one named Hitoshi Shinsu's horse, specifically. He has Aoyama in the front, and Ojiro with an unfamiliar girl in the back. Now. Shinso calls. We, says Aoyama, a laser firing from his stomach. Get back. Izuku calls, and none of them hesitate. The beam passes millimeters in front of Tokoyami, nailing Koda and sending Team 𝗎𝗁𝗎 into distress. Shinso clicks his tongue. Fall back, he says. We can take another pass later if we have to. The next few minutes are equally frantic. Teams continue engaging with them and with each other. Not only do they have to deal with direct attacks from competitors and fending off people out to steal the headband, but some quirk attacks that aren't even aimed at them. Large attacks rock the field every minute or so, and even the precise quirk shots can go wide. The field was in total chaos when Present Mike declares that they're about halfway through. 7 minutes are up, he says. So let's show off the scoreboard and take a look at how everyone's doing. The crowd goes oddly silent. Even the announcers don't say anything for a moment. Izuku doesn't risk looking up to see what the buzz is about. How's our headband? He says. Secure. Ochako replies with a smile on her face, with Izuku smiling back. Whoa, says 𝗕𝗁𝗲. Half the teams lost their headbands. Izuku assumes that has to do with the crowd's reaction, but he still doesn't want to break his focus on this event. Wait a minute here. Present Mike says. Class 1A isn't dominating. Only Team Todoroki and Team Uraraka still have points from that class. And Team Todoroki is down in 5th place. Izuku's eyes widen. After the initial onslaught, none of the teams that have attacked him have been from Class 1B. Only Class 1A and Shinso have targeted them so far. Could they have been planning this? What's Class B doing? He calls. They're targeting our class, Tokoyami responds. They don't seem to be going for each other. So Izuku was right. Class 1B must have done poorly on the obstacle race on purpose. gathering intel and getting their whole class ahead. Which means they don't care about winning, but making sure as many of them move on as possible. But that's a blessing in disguise. Now they've provoked most of Class 1A, including Bakugo, which means his team doesn't have to worry about as many attackers. And if 1B doesn't care about the 10 million points, then they won't have to worry about them attacking either. And he's right. The pressure on them drops almost instantly. Bakugo's explosion ring out in the distance as he fights some blonde boy. It's a pretty fierce back and forth, but Bakugo's sheer determination outpaces Class 1B's defenses and he takes every headband they had. Izuku doesn't bother paying attention to Class 1B's counterattack. It's doomed to failure anyway. I'll have to thank them later for stalling Bakugo. Todoroki. Tokoyami calls. Izuku clicks his tongue. Now this was bad. Get ready, Izuku says. I've waited long enough, says Todoroki. I'm taking that headband. Careful, Tokoyami, Ochako says. We've still got half the match left, and they aren't our only enemies. Izuku's ears twitch a bit. Todoroki was giving orders to his team. Iida, advance. Yaoyorozu, prepare our guard and conductor. Kaminari, I know, man. Izuku says. Kaminari's gonna discharge. Push the button, Rider. 𝗵𝗃 calls. Ochako nods and hits the button on the 𝗬𝗏 in her hand again. Izuku squeezes Tokoyami's shoulder, and they both jump as the turbines whirl to life, rocketing them far overhead, just as the electrical field fires out and stuns every other team. Before any of the ground teams can recover, Todoroki extends a rod of ice to the dirt and freezes over the ground. Ice creeps up the legs of the stunned teams, leaving them trapped. She's learned from the start of the obstacle race, says Eraserhead. 𝗵𝗃. Ochako calls. How long can the jetpack keep us airborne without one of the thrusters? Not long enough, says 𝗵𝗃. My baby needs some adjustments. It can't sustain flight for more than a few minutes at a time, and with one of the thrusters it's going to be a problem again if we go airborne. Well, that's inconvenient, Tokoyami says. Todoroki follows their flight, and as they start to descend, she creates a ring of ice. She trapped them in with her team, while preventing other teams from interfering. Izuku narrows his eyes. This was bad. We've reached the final minute. Present Mike calls. Fight and fight until the final bell tolls. We've got to play, says Izuku. Todoroki, she only uses her right side. If we stick to her left, she won't be able to hit us without hitting Iida. What about Kaminari? Ochako says. 𝗵𝗃, I'm counting on you, says Izuku. If you think Kaminari is about to discharge, shoot him with that net. Todoroki narrows her eyes, and Izuku's sure that she's heard. The net won't stop him from discharging, and it probably won't even get around Yaoyorozu's insulation. But it'll make it harder for Kaminari to focus on using his quirk. And even if he does discharge, it'll be hard for Team Todoroki to move with one of them wrapped up like that. Everyone, says Iida quietly. Izuku's ears twitch once. After this, I'm afraid I won't be able to move. I'm counting on you. Hold tight. Todoroki. Take it. Izuku's eyes go wide. The world around him slows down. All sound fades, except for the humming of Iida's engines. And yet Iida's movements are still a blur. He rockets towards their team, carrying the rest of Team Todoroki with ease. Izuku stared out and out of instinct grabbed Tokoyami by the shoulder as his eyes widened and glowed with Izuku's eyes glowed as well, and a bright glow of red and green was formed that changed to the color yellow. And then came back sound with Team Todoroki at the end of the field, but their eyes widened as they look up, and they weren't the only ones, as everyone from the stadium, including those who were participating in the Cavalry battle, and even Mei 𝗵𝗃, who was confused when she was the only one while trying to find her team. Ha! Ochako says as she saw that she was in the air in the arms of someone that felt familiar and strange at the same time. With the light surrounding this person finally faded, they let out a breath of air with their eyes having the color of the sun, as dark like shadows were around him. My darkness has been known now, then the real Cavalry battle has commenced. The crowd goes absolutely wild, screaming and cheering at the sudden turnabout as they look at the fusion before them. What? Present Mike draws out. What just happened? What was that blistering speed? Could Ida do that this whole time? And it looks Midoriya decided to fuse with one of his teammates. The question is, will this be enough to take back what was stolen from them? If I must, I can rev up my torque to achieve much greater speed, says Ida. But to do so causes my engine to stall. Recipro burst, my ace up my sleeve. Team Todoroki stands triumphant at the end of a massive trail of smoke, but they kept on staring at the floating figure with Todoroki glaring. The new fusion floats down, but he didn't land on the ground. Instead, he grabbed 𝗧𝗵𝗲 with a shadow-like hand and placed her in the palm, doing the same for 𝗧𝗏𝗏. The fusion has a height that was taller than Izuku and 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝐿, wearing the UAP uniform while having a more sharp-like face with black highlights around his eyes, with the eye color being yellow, his hair being the color black as the main color with few green highlighted stripes, and was slicked back with a few of his hair falling a bit in front his forehead, and then came the accessory that was around his neck, a black raven with its eyes being red and green. What should we call you? 𝗧𝗏𝗏 asked as the fusion simply chuckled while narrowing his eyes at Team Todoroki, who was adjusting her collection of headbands. A bit surprising that you fused Midoriya, but I warned you. I am challenging myself against you. What a turnaround, calls present Mike. At the very last second, Team Todoroki has stolen the 10 million points. Team 𝗬𝗏𝗏 has dropped to 0 points. The fusion simply chuckled and then turned towards 𝗧𝗏𝗏. You wanted to know my name, dear maiden. My name is 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏. The now named 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 said with 𝗧𝗵𝗲, saying that they have to get their headbands back, with 𝗧𝗏𝗏 wondering what kind of plan they can pull in this kind of situation until 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 spoke. The only thing we can do is get those headbands since time is running out. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, unfortunately we can't use your gear for airborne since I'm taking pilot towards that. However, your revolver will help us in case they come in close towards us. Got it? 𝗧𝗵𝗲 said as she got her revolver loaded. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏, what's the plan here? 𝗧𝗏𝗏 asked with the fusion staring. DT, the team that stole their headband. The Ice Queen swapped the bands and I can tell which one, really. Then let's get it back so we can win this. 𝗧𝗏𝗏 said, which made 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 nod his head as he told 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏 to make him weightless because he needs a bit of speed for the plan he has in mind. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 with the mind of 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗏 and Izuku were in sync, and as their shadow grows even more it felt like their darkness was consuming them. 9 meters, the fusion thought as he stared at the collection of headbands on the dual quirk user. The middle one. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 says. Are you sure? Says 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Yes, I'm pretty sure, 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏. Your job is to grab it. I'm going for it, 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏 declares. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 glowed as he extends more shadow-like arms to push him and his team and rushed forward to the stationary Team Todoroki. 20 seconds left. Todoroki raises her burning left arm as a defense. But before 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏 can react, something happens to Todoroki. Her whole body stiffens, the flames flicker out. She stares down at her arm with something akin to alarm. And that's all 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏 needs. She wrenches the arms out of her way and snatches the middle headband from Todoroki's neck. I got it, she cries. I got it. An incredible recovery from Team 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏, calls present Mike. They've rocketed back up to first. Todoroki, pull your wits about you, says Ida. They saw through our ruse, Yaoyorozu says. Well played. 10 seconds left, calls present Mike. Count him down. The crowd screams along to the countdown. 10, with Ida still stalled and Kaminari near his limits, there's a good chance Todoroki won't get another shot to attack them. 9. But that's not their only threat right now, as 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 took a few steps back to distance away from Team Todoroki so they won't get the chance to take the headband again. 8. But Todoroki wasn't the only one out to take the 10 million points. 7. Case in point, the explosion rocketing towards them right now. Bakugo appears from out of the smoke. 6. Kaminari discharges, Yaoyorozu grounding her team from the shock. 5. Todoroki readies her right arm again. With her own team immobilized, there's nothing to stop her from freezing the ground again. 4. Nothing except Bakugo propelling himself with his own explosions as he sped through. 3. Bakugo hangs midair, looking between the two teams for the 10 million points. 2. He spots the headband around 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏's head and launches himself towards them with enough speed to blitz towards them with a glare on his face. 1. Bakugo knew he had to be even faster as lightning arcs got even more wilder around him as he extends an arm forward as 𝗧𝗵𝗲 raises a gun to shoot, but Bakugo avoided them while bypassing her, but his victory was short-lived as he got punched by Izuku, who sent multiple shadow-like tendrils at the ticking time bomb with rabies. That launched him away. Time's up. Present Mike screams. As that was said, Bakugo hit the ground hard as he screamed in rage. Ochako leans back on the comfortable shadow hand, letting out a loud sigh of relief. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 slides the revolver back into position on the side of her arm, as both her and Ochako was lowered down by Izuku. So that's your power, 𝗧𝗵𝗲. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 said as she stared at the fusion in wonder with Izuku simply folding his arms. Human fusion is something my counterpart has to deal with, so no experimentation. Dear 𝗧𝗵𝗲, Izuku said towards the inventor, who pouted, which made the fusion chuckle. Present Mike cheerfully calls out to the audience. Let's see who our top 4 teams are, shall we, he says. In first place, winning back their original 10 million points, Team Uraraka. The girl in question lowers herself off of the shadow plam as the 4 of them, well, 3 of them huddle together in celebration. In second place, Team Bakugo. Son of AF Beach. Bakugo scream at the ground, barely putting in the effort to sit up where he fell. Third place goes to Team Tet. Wait, there was an upset in those last few seconds. Third place is Team Shinso. Izuku spares a glance at the boy who challenged their class, as Shinso simply wails away with a satisfaction on his face. And fourth place goes to Team Todoroki. Present Mike concludes. These top 16 competitors will move on to the final event. That event will be after an hour's lunch break. See you all then. After that, Izuku sighed as he glowed with his figure being split and having 2 colors, green and red, and as the 2 colors formed 2 figures which were Izuku and 𝗵𝗃𝗫. Both boys stared at each other and gave each other a firm handshake with smiles dawning their faces. It was an honor to fuse with you, Izuku. I hope our darkness becomes even bigger in the future, 𝗵𝗃𝗫 said with Izuku thanking him while he got a pat on the back from 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Good job, 10 million, she says. Thanks for getting me so far. I can't wait to see that power of yours. Hey, maybe we should fuse now to see how it worlds for us, huh? She said with enthusiasm that it made Izuku back up a bit, with 𝗵𝗃𝗫 and Ochako watching, with the latter staring at the inventor. Midoriya. Izuku turns around to face Todoroki. Can we speak in private? Izuku glances at his teammates. Ochako nods. We'll save you a spot, she says. Todoroki leads Izuku back to the tunnels they took out onto the field, the entrance to the stands area. Todoroki sighs quietly, leaning against the wall and glaring intently at Izuku. Todoroki. The girl doesn't answer. She seems pensive somehow. If we don't hurry, the cafeteria will get really crowded, says Izuku. How can you do it? Todoroki says suddenly. Do what? Izuku asks the girl. You just, Todoroki runs a hand through her hair. You just use that power so easily. Like it doesn't bother you. How can you use that power using others for yourself? Izuku's eyes widened. What the hell? When Izuku heard this, his eyes narrowed. What exactly are you implying, Todoroki? He asked as he felt as his mind was drowning in a large pool of water and it was suffocating for him. It's because of what I saw you, using others for your own gain instead of dash, but she was stopped by Izuku, who punched the wall behind him. This isn't about Met, is about you, Todoroki, since for some reason you hate the fact that I can freely use my power while you can't. As soon as he said that, the girl glared, which made Izuku sigh. Tell me the reason why you wanted to talk with me. Get it over it or I'll just leave and meet with my friends. Todoroki simply let out a breath of cold air. The reason why I'm against you is because of your hate towards the symbol of peace. What? Izuku questioned, with his eyes widened when he heard that from the girl. Why is that the reason? Why would that be the reason for you to tell me that I'm taking advantage of others while using my quirk, which works that way? It's because you understand me. Izuku reels back at that. What do you mean? You have this hate towards All Might, the #1 hero, while I have my father, who I hate ever since my quirk awakened. Your father. Endeavor. Tell me, have you ever heard of quirk marriages? Izuku's mouth hangs open. A chill rushes over his skin and down his spine, as he felt his mind go blank when he heard that. You mean? Yes. That one word from Todoroki was filled with more horror than Izuku can imagine. My father rose through the ranks quickly. He was determined to surpass All Might. But he never could. He sees him as an unmovable mountain. So if his own power wasn't enough, Todoroki covers her scar with his hand. I'll never be his tool. My mother, in all my memories of her, she's crying. She saw this left side and could only see him. She poured boiling water on me. Do you get it now? I won't use his quirk, the quirk he gave me. I'll beat him with only my right side. Todoroki pauses. And that's why you confuse me so much. You using others as a way to get more power, why do you use it? Why do you so easily accept the power that makes you use others? Because it's mine now, says Izuku. Todoroki twitches. I don't get a choice. This is what I am now. And the power that helped me to form into someone else, thanks to those who I've bonded with, I'll use them as if they were part of me since I was born. I can't just pretend that I'm still quirkless. Not when every step I take reminds me of the past me. So I'm going to make the most of it. How can I call myself a hero if I don't? Izuku admits. Izuku then stared at Todoroki with a look that screamed he was serious, and all she could do was open and close her mouth. Then she looks away. The silence stretches until it's clear that Todoroki isn't going to say anything else. Everyone here, Izuku says quietly, is trying so hard. Even people who aren't in the hero course. I can't let myself stay so far behind. So I'll give it my all. And I'll win. Izuku leaves her in the tunnel and goes to join his friends for lunch, feeling a bit miffed, but as soon as he saw his friends, it disappeared as he talks and laughed with them while enjoying the lunch and waiting for the event to determine who will make it to the top and win the sports festival, with Izuku not realizing that he was being watched by someone as soon as he walked towards his friend group. It was none other than Katsuki Bakawar, with him being the only one sitting around a table. Since those he teamed up with didn't want anything to do with him since they saw his true nature during the Cavalry battle and during the USJ incident. Bakawar just glared at Izuku. 𝗕𝗏𝗄 I'll kill you. With his eyes having orange like lightning dancing around his eyes while wincing a bit as he looked at his hands, seeing them shaking a bit. Tucked away in a dark corner of Kamino, an unassuming building housed a dimly lit bar. The wispy form of Kurogiri stood at the counter, wiping down glasses. Every few minutes, his glowing yellow eyes would flit to the far end of the bar, warily eyeing the twitchy figure hunched in front of an old CRT television. Shigaraki's eyes were glued to the screen, a twitch in his left eye. He held a remote tightly in his hand, his pinky finger ramrod straight away from the device as his thumb jabbed two buttons in quick succession, over and over again. Play. Reverse. Play. Reverse. On the grainy screen, two would-be heroes stood in front of a crumbling wall of ice. Play. Flash of multicolored light. Now there stood only one hero. Reverse. Two heroes. Play. One hero. If Kurogiri still had a tongue, he'd be biting it right now. Shigaraki was supposed to be watching the festival in full, both to familiarize himself with future enemies and scope out potential allies. The second event had likely started by now, but all the young man could do was keep going back to that single moment in the first event. So, Kurogiri perked up, turning when Shigaraki finally spoke. Not a party swap. Reverse. A team attack. Play. A quirk that can merge people together. One hero. Mind two heroes. Body. One hero. And quirk. Kurogiri sat his glass and ragged down. A unique power. Are you thinking he could be swayed to our side? Shigaraki snorted violently. He finally hit play and let the footage continue as intended. Didn't you see how the brat beamed at the crowd? He's a goody-goody through and through. But his quirk? Shigaraki turned slowly towards Kurogiri, his lips pulled back in a wide, decrepit smile. Think of what the doctor could do with it. Hour later, now that lunch is over, it's finally time to reveal the last game. But before that, there's good news for all of you who did not make it to the finals. Present Mike announced as now everybody was back in the stadium, ready for the real tournament to begin. This is just a sports festival. So we have prepared recreational games that everyone can participate in too. We've even brought real cheerleaders from America to liven things up. As President Mike was about to move on, he and the rest of the audience plus the participants noticed something peculiar. Huh? What are they doing? Aizawa lazily asked. The center of attention currently were all of the female students of Class 1A-Miyuki were dressed up in orange cheerleader uniforms that really showed off their assets. What's the matter, Class 1A? What kind of fan service is that? President Mike cried out as the majority of the males in the stadium were ogling their curvaceous figures which the cheerleading uniforms didn't fail to display. Kaminari and Minoru both give each other a thumbs up when they thought of this plan. Mineta! Kaminari! You tricked us, didn't you? Momo yelled in fury as she got a giant red tick mark. The two pervs, who told her and Jiro that everybody was required to wear cheerleading clothes to do a cheer battle in the afternoon. But clearly, that was all just a lie to get the girls to wear CC outfits. The CC vice president of Class A dropped to her knees with a sad sigh. Why am I always caught up in Mineta's schemes? I even used creation to make the outfits. Ochako patted her back in an attempt to comfort her. Hey, lighten up, Yamamoto. It ain't all bad. The zero-gravity user said as she took a quick glance to the corner of her eye to see a certain green-haired young boy who had a slight blush on his face, but he didn't look away, and this caused Ochako to smirk as she saw Izuku getting flustered from seeing her like that made her feel content. Those are so dumb. Jiro yelled as she threw her pom-poms to the floor in frustration. Well, there is still a little time left before the finals, and it'd be a pain if things got tense. It's fine. Let's do it. Toru exclaimed in excitement as she didn't mind showing off a little. What? Do you like this, huh? Tsuyu rhetorically asked. All right, everyone. Let's have fun competing in the recreational games. When that's over, the 16 from the 4 teams that made it to the final round will duke it out tournament style, 1-1-1. President Mike announced, the last round is a tournament where we fight 1-1-1. I'm going to stand on the stage that I watch every year on TV. Kirishima said as he pumped his fists. Was it a tournament last year? Mina asked. It's different every year, but there's a one-on-one competition every year. Last year, it was a sports chamber match. Zero said. Now, let's prepare to draw lots to determine the bracket. Midnight said as in her hands was a yellow box labeled, lots. Once the bracket is determined, we'll have the recreational games and then start. The 16 finalists can choose whether or not they want to participate in the recreation. I'm sure some of you want to rest or save your strength. Now from the first place team, excuse me. Ojiro suddenly called out as he raised high hand. I'm withdrawing. Everybody gasped. Ojiro, but why? Izuku asked with narrowed eyes towards his classmate. This is a rare chance for pros to see you. Tenya exclaimed as he too was shocked to hear that Ojiro wanted to quit. I barely remember anything from the cavalry battle until almost the end. I think it was that guy's quirk. Izuku narrowed his eyes as he scanned through the participants. If I remember correctly, Ojiro was with. His eyes then landed on Shinso, who just turned his head away as soon as Izuku focused his eyes on him. I know that this is a great chance and that it's foolish to waste it. Well, if you know that, then why would you just quit after making it so far? Izuku asked as he genuinely didn't want his classmate to waste his opportunity like that. Everyone here competed by giving their all. I can't be up there with everyone without knowing what really happened. Ojiro said with a proud tone as he balled his fist. You're worrying too much about it. You should just make sure you produce results in the finals. Toru added. If you're going to say that, then I didn't do anything either. Mina said as she empathized with what Ojiro was going through. She didn't feel she did much work either. Ojiro put his palm to his face. No, that's not it. I am talking about my pride here. I can't. Izuku couldn't help but sigh. However, he completely understood what Ojiro was trying to say and even commended him as his respect for his fellow-tailed classmate went up a ton. Also, why are you girls all wearing cheerleader outfits? Ojiro asked as all of the girls from Class A sweat dropped. Izuku walked up towards Ojiro as he placed a strong hand on his shoulder. Hey, listen, if that is your decision, I respect it 100%. I completely feel you. You have a valid reason for wanting to drop out of the tournament, and as your class president, I commend you for owning up. Huh. A lot of people didn't expect for Izuku to actually support Ojiro's decision. As a matter of fact, they would think that Izuku would plead with him to not quit and just show what he can really do in the tournament. But now, they were seeing a completely different side to the green-haired boy. Thank you, Midoriya. I really appreciate that. I'm 𝗓𝗫𝗁𝗔𝗂𝐁𝐵 Shota from Class B. I also want to withdraw for the same reason. Regardless of ability, don't you think it goes against the goal of this sports festival for those who didn't do anything to move on to the final round? One chubby student with silver hair said to Midnight as he also felt that he did not deserve to advance to the tournament. What's with these guys? They're so manly, Kirishima said with tears coming out of his eyes. This is an unusual turn of events. We'll have to see what the chief umpire, Midnight, has to say about this, Present Mike said as they awaited the R-rated hero's decision. Youthful talk like that is something that turns me on. Shota. Tojiro. I accept your withdrawal. Midnight said with a lecherous grin. Did she just say that turns her on? Kaminari asked with a sweat drop. Bro, just roll with it. Kirishima replied as he also sweat dropped. I'm going to do it, okay? Aoyama said as he placed his hand on Ojiro's shoulder. In that case, we will have to move up 2 people from the 5th place cavalry battle team, Midnight hummed. If that's what's going to happen, then rather than us who barely did anything during the cavalry battle, it should be them, right? Itsuka said as her teammates nodded in agreement. The ones who fought to the end and stayed in the top, which is Team Tetsu, right? Kendo, what are you doing? Tetsu asked as he thought it was idiotic for her to throw away her opportunity like that. Don't worry, you just show them what it means to battle a student from Class 1B, Kendo said with a smile on her face with the rest of the class agreeing. Why you guys? Tetsu cried out to the heavens thanking God for this opportunity. His team then agreed that Tetsu and Ibara should be the ones to advance seeing as they were the 2 that did the most work during the cavalry battle. And so, Tetsu and Shiozaki have moved up to make 16. Now then, we will all see on the screen on those who will be facing each other randomly in the first round of the tournament. So without wasting any more time, let's see who will each other. Midnight announced. As soon as she said that, the screen above was seen, revealing those who will be facing against. Now, let's take a look at the official bracket. Midnight announced as she pointed her WHP towards the jumbotron that displayed the entire bracket. ST match, Izuku Midoriya vs. Hitoshi Shinso ND match, Mei Hatsum vs Tenya Ida RD match, Katsuki Bakugo vs Ochako Urarkadich match, 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗏 Tokoyami vs Momo Yaoyorozuich match, Denki Kaminari vs Ibara Shiozaki match, Mina Ashido vs Yuga Aoyama match, Tetsu vs Ijiro Kirishima match, Hanta Siro vs Miyuki Todoroki. Izuku took a look at the bracket as he saw the name of his opponent. The first match of the first round. Wait a minute. If I remember correctly, Shinso was the team captain of Ojiro's team. It's you, isn't it? Izuku Midoriya. Shinso said out of nowhere as he was behind Izuku. Izuku turned around to face him, and as he did, he suddenly remembered where he saw this guy before. He was the one who came to our class making a declaration of war. He said he was from the General Studies course and intended on making it to the Hero course. He's pretty bold, but unfortunately it won't be enough, Izuku thought in his mind as this was the first time he was socially interacting with the purple-haired General Studies student. I'm looking forward to our first match, Shinso said. But before Izuku could even say anything, suddenly a large yellow-haired tail covered his mouth. Midoriya! Ojiro yelled from behind. Shinso smirked as he walked away. When Shinso was out of earshot, Ojiro removed his hold on Izuku. Ojiro, what's the matter? Don't answer him. Okay. It's pretty much done. The pro hero, 𝗵𝗵𝗲 said as he was using his quirk to construct a tournament fighting stage. Thank you, 𝗵𝗵𝗲. Hey guys, are you ready? Present Mike asked the crowd. They then proceeded to cheer loudly, showing their anticipation for the tournament to finally begin. The recreational games were finally over, and it was finally time to get to the real fun. A lot has happened, but now it has come to this. A serious battle. You can only depend on yourself. You have no teammates or comrades here. It is a classic one-on-one style tournament. Even if you are not a hero, you will face lots of situations like that. You get that, right? Heart, skill, body, wisdom, and knowledge. Use all of that to rush up. Present Mike exclaimed as he was hyping up the crowd even more. Izuku was currently in the tunnel that leads to the fighting stage. He was currently doing warm-up stretches and doing his best to prepare himself mentally. It was his first ever match in a sports festival, so of course there were some nerves here and there, but overall, he was ready to compete. Oki can do this, I can do this. Are you prepared for a fight or are you constipating? The being said inside Izuku's head with Izuku's twitching a bit from what he just heard. Why would you even say that? And why are you talking to me? Izuku said inside's mind with the being only chuckling, not saying a word nor answering Izuku's question, which made him sigh in irritation. Young Midoriya. When Izuku heard that voice, he stopped for a second as his eyes widened a bit as the irritation started to rise even more. As Izuku turned his attention towards the one who he thought was amazing, his former idol, the man that he now despised, and the person who gave something to a literal temper tantrum explosive maniac who will that power for his own gain and not help others in need. What is it that you want? As Izuku said this, the being that was in his subconsciousness was observing with a hint of amusement. Listen, young Midoriya, I understand why you hate me, because of what I said to you last year, but I want to make things right between us, so how about we start over even though it might take some time for us to have a decent conversation? He said this while giving Izuku a smile on his face, but Izuku, who simply had his eyes closed, felt a surge of power and gave a quick hand motion that made Toshinori Yagi hit the ground with his eyes widen as he saw Izuku's change of appearance. Eyes red as the rose, hair that moves on its own, and the face that Toshinori saw held nothing but hate towards him. I don't want anything to with you, hypocrite. That's all Izuku said as he left Toshinori on the floor and got ready to head towards the match while facing his opponent. This won't take long. Can't let Ojiro's fate in me go up in smoke. Take his advice and finish this battle. Plus, that was his final thoughts as his eyes glowed even brighter as the sound of chuckling was heard in his mind.